Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The radio crackled to life at 2:47 a.m., interrupting the dull hum of Officer Aaron Begay's patrol car as it slowly made its way along Highway 491. The road between Shiprock and Tohatchi was notorious for its desolation. For 60 miles, there were only sagebrush, red rock formations, and the occasional rusting, abandoned vehicle in the desert night. Unit 7, we have a situation at mile marker 42. Abandoned vehicle, possible missing persons case. Aaron picked up the handset. Unit 7 responding, ETA 15 minutes. The dispatcher's voice carried an edge of concern. Aaron, the vehicle's been there for 3 days. Family just reported their daughter missing. Maria Chi, 23 years old. She was driving from Albuquerque to visit family in Window Rock. Copy that. Any signs of an accident? Negative. Vehicle appears intact. No visible damage reported by passing motorists. Aaron pressed harder on the accelerator, watching the speedometer climb as the empty road stretched endlessly ahead. The headlights carved through the darkness, illuminating nothing but asphalt and the occasional tumbleweed skittering across the highway. This was his 3rd year with the Navajo Nation Police, and missing persons cases in this terrain rarely ended well. The reservation covered 27,000 square miles across 3 states, plenty of space for someone to disappear without a trace. When he reached mile marker 42, Aaron's headlights swept across a silver Honda Civic parked on the shoulder. The car sat at an odd angle, as if the driver had pulled over in a hurry. He called in his arrival and stepped out, flashlight in hand. The desert silence was absolute. No wind, no coyotes, just the ticking of his cooling engine. The Honda was unlocked. Inside, a purse sat on the passenger seat, wallet and phone still inside. The keys dangled from the ignition. Aaron's skin prickled. Nobody left their belongings like this unless something forced them to exit the vehicle quickly. He swept his flashlight across the interior. No blood, no signs of struggle. Maria's driver's license photo showed a young Navajo woman with bright eyes and a warm smile. Oren circled the vehicle, examining the ground. The packed dirt showed multiple footprints, but the wind had softened their edges, making them impossible to date accurately. One set led away from the car, heading into the desert. He followed them with his flashlight beam until they simply stopped. 20 feet from the road, the tracks ended as if Maria had vanished into thin air. He returned to his vehicle and called dispatch. I need backup and a search team at mile marker 42. Looks like she walked into the desert, but the tracks just end. Something's not right here. While waiting for backup, Aaron continued searching the area. His flashlight beam caught something metallic glinting in the sagebrush. A silver bracelet with traditional Navajo designs. He bagged it as evidence, noting its location. As he stood, a sound made him freeze. Somewhere in the darkness, barely audible, came the sound of a woman crying. "Maria?" he called out, sweeping his flashlight across the desert. "Maria Chi, this is Officer Begay with the Navajo Police. If you can hear me, please respond." The crying stopped abruptly. Aaron waited, straining his ears, but only silence answered him. He called out again, moving deeper into the desert, following no particular path. The crying resumed, this time from a different direction, behind him, closer to the road. He spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but saw nothing. "Maria, if that's you, please, I'm here to help." The crying turned to laughter, soft, almost childlike. Aaron's hand moved to his service weapon. In his 3 years on the force, he'd never encountered anything like this. The laughter seemed to move, circling him at a distance his flashlight couldn't reach. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Headlights appeared on the horizon, his backup arriving. Officer Nathan Yazzie pulled up in another tribal police vehicle, stepping out with his own flashlight. "What do we have, Aaron?" "Abandoned vehicle, belongs to Maria Chi. Her belongings are still in the car, and I found tracks leading into the desert that just... stop." "And Nathan." Aaron hesitated. "I heard someone out there, crying, then laughing, but I couldn't find them." Nathan's expression grew serious. He was a 20-year veteran of the force, had seen everything the reservation could throw at a cop. "Show me where the tracks end." They walked together into the desert, Aaron leading the way to where the footprints disappeared. Nathan knelt, examining the ground carefully with his flashlight. "These are at least 2 days old. See how the edges have been worn down?" He stood, looking out into the vast darkness. "We'll need a full search team at first light. Dogs, too." As they walked back to their vehicles, Nathan asked, "The sounds you heard, did they seem human?" I think so, but the way they moved, how quickly they shifted position..." Aaron shook his head. "I don't know, Nathan. Something feels wrong about this whole thing." They spent the next 2 hours setting up a perimeter, taping off the Honda, and waiting for the search and rescue team. As the eastern sky began to lighten, painting the desert in shades of purple and orange, the search began in earnest. 6 officers, 3 volunteers from the community, and 2 tracking dogs spread out from the abandoned vehicle. The dogs picked up Maria's scent immediately, following the same path Aaron had traced earlier. But when they reached the spot where the tracks ended, both dogs began whimpering, backing away with their tails between their legs. Their handler, Samuel Sosi, tried to encourage them forward, but they refused, pulling against their leashes. "I've never seen them act like this," Samuel said, clearly disturbed. "These dogs have tracked through everything. Bodies, predator kills, you name it. But something here has them spooked." The search continued throughout the day, covering a 5-mile radius from the vehicle. They found nothing. No clothing, no additional tracks, no signs that Maria had been in the area beyond those initial footprints. As the sun reached its zenith, baking the desert floor, Officer Yazzie called for a break. "We're going to expand the search grid," he announced to the team. "Aaron, I want you to interview the family again, see if there's anything they didn't mention. Check with friends, boyfriends, anyone who might know why she'd stop here." Aaron drove to Window Rock, where Maria's parents lived in a modest home on the outskirts of town. Daniel and Lorraine Benally had aged visibly in the 3 days since their daughter's disappearance. They sat on their worn couch holding hands as Aaron asked his questions. Was Maria having any problems? Relationship issues? Work stress? Anything that might explain her behavior? Lorraine shook her head. She was happy. She'd just gotten a promotion at the hospital in Albuquerque. She was coming home to celebrate with us. Did she mention stopping anywhere along the way? No, Daniel said. She called us when she left Albuquerque, said she'd be here by dinner. When she didn't show up, we thought maybe she'd decided to stay with friends in Gallup. But when we couldn't reach her phone, Aaron showed them the bracelet he'd found. Lorraine gasped, taking it with trembling hands. This is hers. Her grandmother made it for her 18th birthday. She never took it off. The interview yielded no new leads. Maria had no enemies, no history of mental illness, no reason to disappear voluntarily. Aaron drove back to the search site as the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of red and gold. The search team had found nothing. As darkness fell, most of the volunteers went home, but Aaron stayed with Nathan and two other officers. They set up lights around the abandoned Honda, determined to continue the search. Around 10 p.m., the crying started again. This time, all four officers heard it. The sound drifted across the desert, mournful and lost. They spread out, flashlights sweeping the darkness, calling Maria's name. The crying seemed to move with them, always just out of reach, always just beyond the range of their lights. Then Nathan's radio crackled. "All units, be advised. We've got a second abandoned vehicle on Highway 491, mile marker 67. Another missing person reported." Aaron felt a chill run down his spine, despite the warm night air. Mile marker 67 was only 25 miles from where they stood. He looked at Nathan, saw his own concern reflected in the older officer's eyes. "Go," Nathan said. "Check it out. We'll continue here." Aaron drove through the darkness, pushing his patrol vehicle hard. The second abandoned car was a pickup truck, parked neatly on the shoulder just like Maria's Honda. The keys were in the ignition, wallet on the dashboard. The driver, according to his license, was Thomas Yazzie, a 45-year-old contractor from Farmington. Aaron searched the area with growing dread. Just like before, footprints led into the desert and simply stopped. Just like before, personal belongings were left behind. And just like before, as he stood alone in the darkness, he heard it. Distant laughter, drifting across the empty landscape. He called it in, requested additional units, and began documenting the scene. But his mind kept returning to the same troubling thought. Whatever was happening out here, it wasn't over. Two people had vanished without explanation, and Aaron had the sinking feeling there would be more. As he waited for backup, Aaron noticed something he'd missed before. A pattern in the dirt near where the footprints ended. It was subtle, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. Circular marks, as if something heavy had been dragged in a spiral pattern. He photographed it, then looked for similar marks near Maria's car tomorrow. The radio crackled again. "Officer Begay, we've found something." It was Nathan's voice, tight with tension. Aaron's heart raced as he responded. "What is it?" "Not over the radio. Get back here now." Aaron arrived back at Maria's abandoned vehicle to find Nathan and the other officers standing in a tight circle. Their flashlights pointed at something on the ground. As he approached, Nathan stepped aside, and Aaron saw what had disturbed them. A piece of fabric, torn and dirty, partially buried in the sand. But it wasn't the fabric itself that was unsettling. It was what was underneath it. Bones. Human bones, old and weathered, arranged in a deliberate pattern. A skull sat at the center, surrounded by ribs and vertebrae forming a spiral that matched the marks Aaron had just photographed at the second scene. "These have been here for years," Nathan said quietly. "Decades, maybe. We need to call in the FBI, the medical examiner, everyone. This is bigger than just two missing persons." Aaron knelt beside the bones, careful not to disturb them. "Nathan, I found the same spiral pattern at the second scene. Someone's been doing this for a long time. They sealed off the area and waited for the forensics team to arrive from Albuquerque." As dawn broke over the desert, revealing the full extent of the bone arrangement, Aaron noticed something else. More bones, scattered in a wider circle around the central spiral. Some so weathered they were almost part of the landscape itself. Dr. Patricia Todicini, the medical examiner, arrived by helicopter at 7 a.m. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and steady hands, known throughout the Southwest for her expertise in forensic anthropology. She worked methodically, photographing and cataloging each bone before carefully removing them for analysis. Based on the weathering patterns and mineral deposits, these bones are from different time periods, she told Aaron and Nathan as she worked. The ones in the center are oldest, maybe 40, 50 years. The ones on the outer edges are more recent, perhaps 5 to 10 years old. How many victims are we looking at? Nathan asked. Dr. Todicini paused, surveying the site. At least 7 individuals, possibly more. I'll need to do a full analysis back at the lab, but Aaron, this is a dumping ground. Someone's been bringing people here for decades. The search for Maria Chi and Thomas Yazzie intensified. State police joined the effort, along with FBI agents from the Albuquerque field office. Helicopters swept the desert, while ground teams systematically searched every square mile of the surrounding area. But as the days passed with no new discoveries, hope began to fade. Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. He spent his off hours studying maps of the area, looking for patterns. The 2 abandonment sites were exactly 25 miles apart. He plotted them on a map, then searched police records for other missing persons cases along Highway 491. What he found chilled him. Over the past 50 years, there had been 17 unexplained disappearances along this stretch of highway. Not all had left abandoned vehicles. Some had simply vanished while walking. Others had been driving and never reached their destinations. But when Aaron plotted them on his map, a pattern emerged. The disappearances formed a rough line along the highway, with clusters every 25 miles. He brought his findings to Nathan and the FBI team. Special Agent Rebecca Harrison, a seasoned investigator with experience in serial crime patterns, studied the map intently. "You're right, there's definitely a pattern here," she said. "But what triggers it? Why these specific people? There's no common demographic. Men, women, different ages, different backgrounds." Aaron had been thinking about this. What if it's not about who they are, but when they pass through? Look at the dates. Maria disappeared on the new moon. So did Thomas Yazzie. When I checked the historical records, he pulled up a lunar calendar on his laptop. 70% of the disappearances happened within 2 days of a new moon. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Agent Harrison finally spoke. "That's unusual, but it gives us something to work with. The next new moon is in 3 weeks. We can set up surveillance, have undercover units patrol the highway." As the investigation continued, Aaron found himself assigned to night patrol along Highway 491. He drove the stretch between mile markers 40 and 70 repeatedly, watching for any signs of unusual activity. On his 3rd night, something strange happened. At 3:15 a.m., his radio died. Not just static or interference, complete silence. His cell phone showed no signal. Even his patrol car's computer system flickered and went dark. He was completely cut off from communication. Aaron pulled over, trying to restart his equipment. As he worked, he noticed headlights approaching from behind. A van, moving slowly, no plates visible in the darkness. It passed him without slowing, and Aaron made a decision. He followed it, keeping his distance, his dead radio preventing him from calling for backup. The van continued for exactly 25 miles, then pulled over at mile marker 67, the same spot where Thomas Yazzie had disappeared. Aaron parked a quarter-mile back, killed his headlights, and approached on foot. In the darkness, he could make out 2 figures exit the van. They moved with purpose, dragging something heavy toward the desert. Aaron drew his weapon and moved closer, using the scattered rocks and sagebrush for cover. As he got nearer, he could hear voices, low, rhythmic chanting in a language he didn't recognize. It wasn't Navajo, wasn't Spanish or any of the Pueblo languages he was familiar with. It was something older, more guttural. The figures had stopped about 50 feet from the road. In the dim starlight, Aaron could see them arranging objects on the ground, the same spiral pattern he'd seen at the other sites. His heart pounded as he realized what he was witnessing. These were the people responsible for the disappearances. He needed backup, but with his radio dead, he had to handle this alone. Aaron stepped out from cover, weapon raised. "Navajo tribal police! Stop what you're doing and show me your hands." The chanting stopped. Both figures turned toward him, and in the darkness, Aaron couldn't make out their faces. They stood perfectly still, unnaturally still like mannequins. Then one of them spoke, and the voice made Aaron's blood run cold. It was Maria Chi's voice, but wrong somehow, flat, emotionless. "Officer B. Gay, we've been waiting for you." Aaron's flashlight was in his other hand. He raised it, illuminating the figures, and nearly dropped his weapon in shock. It was Maria Chi and Thomas Yazzie, but their eyes were wrong, completely black, no whites visible, reflecting his light like an animal's. Their skin was pale, almost gray, and they moved with a strange, synchronized precision. "Maria? Thomas? What happened to you?" Maria tilted her head at an unnatural angle. "We're better now. We understand now. The pattern must continue." "What pattern? What are you talking about?" Thomas spoke, his voice carrying the same flat quality. "The highway feeds. Has always fed. Will always feed. We are its servants now." Aaron kept his weapon trained on them, though every instinct screamed at him to run. "You're both coming with me. We'll get you help, figure out what happened." "No." Both spoke in unison. "You will join, or you will feed." They moved toward him, not walking but gliding, their feet barely touching the ground. Aaron fired a warning shot, but they didn't flinch. He aimed at Thomas's leg and fired. The bullet hit. Aaron saw the impact, but Thomas kept moving forward without even slowing. Aaron backed away, firing again, center mass this time. Both figures continued their approach, unbothered by the gunshots. Panic overtook training. Aaron turned and ran, sprinting back toward his patrol car. Behind him, he heard that terrible laughter again, not from one voice but from many, echoing across the desert. He reached his vehicle and slammed the door, frantically trying to start the engine. It turned over on the third try, and Aaron floored it, tires spinning in the dirt as he fled. In his rearview mirror, he saw Maria and Thomas standing in the road, watching him go. As he watched, they simply faded. Not walking away, not hiding. They became transparent and then were gone. His radio crackled back to life 10 miles down the road, all his equipment suddenly functional again. Aaron pulled over, hands shaking, and called for immediate backup. Within an hour, the site was swarming with law enforcement. But they found nothing. No van, no tire tracks, no evidence of Aaron's encounter except his own footprints and shell casings. Agent Harrison interviewed him extensively, and while she remained professional, Aaron could see the skepticism in her eyes. "Officer Begay, you're saying you shot 2 missing persons who didn't react to bullets and then vanished?" "I know how it sounds," Aaron said, "but check my weapon." "Count the rounds. I'm not making this up." The investigation shifted after Aaron's encounter. Psychiatrists were brought in to evaluate him, though he passed every test. More disturbing, though, were the reports that started coming in from other officers. Nathan Yazzie reported seeing figures on the highway that disappeared when approached. Another officer found fresh footprints that ended abruptly. Just like the original scenes, but this time with no associated vehicle. 3 weeks had passed since Aaron's encounter. The new moon was tonight, and Highway 491 was under heavy surveillance. Every mile marker between 40 and 70 had either a marked or unmarked unit stationed nearby. FBI agents, state troopers, and tribal police formed an unprecedented net along the desert highway. If anyone attempted another abduction, they would be caught. Aaron sat in his patrol car at mile marker 55, exactly halfway between the two previous disappearance sites. Nathan was positioned 5 miles north, while Agent Harrison coordinated from a mobile command center set up in a parking area near Tohatchi. The radio channels were alive with check-ins every 30 minutes. Unit 7, status report. Harrison's voice came through the radio. Unit 7, all quiet at marker 55. Aaron responded, scanning the empty highway through his windshield. The darkness was absolute. No moon, only stars providing faint illumination across the desert landscape. At 1 a.m., the first report came in. "Command, this is Unit 3. An officer named Daniel Nez radioed from mile marker 45. "I've got a vehicle stopped on the shoulder. Approaching now." "Unit 3, wait for backup," Harrison ordered. "Unit 7, can you respond?" Aaron was already starting his engine. "En route. ETA 3 minutes." As he drove, Aaron listened to Daniel's updates. "It's a sedan, Nevada plates. Driver's door is open, nobody visible inside." The transmission cut to static. "Unit 3, respond," Harrison called. No answer. All units converge on mile marker 45. Approach with extreme caution. Aaron arrived first, his headlights illuminating Daniel's patrol car parked behind a blue Toyota Camry. Daniel's vehicle was empty. Driver's door open, engine still running. The sedan was also empty, just as Daniel had reported. Aaron called it in while checking both vehicles. Weapon drawn. "Command, Unit 3 is missing." No sign of struggle, his weapon is still in the holster on the front seat. More units arrived within minutes, flooding the scene with light. They found Daniel's footprints leading toward the desert, following the same pattern, walking normally for about 30 feet, then simply ending. But this time, there was something new. In the beam of multiple flashlights, they could see a shimmer in the air where the track stopped, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. Except the desert was cool in the early morning hours. Agent Harrison arrived personally, bringing specialized equipment. She had thermal imaging cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, and other instruments Aaron didn't recognize. As the FBI tech team set up their equipment, the thermal camera operator suddenly shouted, "I've got something!" Multiple heat signatures, about 200 meters out, moving this way. Everyone turned their lights toward the desert. At first, there was nothing. Then, emerging from the darkness like phantoms, came a group of people walking in perfect synchronization. Aaron counted 7 figures, all moving with that same gliding motion he'd witnessed before. "Hold your positions," Harrison commanded. "Do not engage unless they become hostile." As the figures drew closer, Aaron recognized some of them. Maria Chi and Thomas Yazzie were there, along with Daniel Nez and 4 others he didn't know, likely victims from previous years. Their eyes were the same solid black, their skin that unnatural gray pallor. They stopped about 50 feet from the line of officers. Maria stepped forward and spoke, her voice carrying clearly in the desert silence. "You cannot stop this. The pattern has existed since before your ancestors walked these lands. The highway is hungry." "Maria," Agent Harrison called out through a megaphone. "We want to help you. Tell us what happened. Who did this to you?" Maria tilted her head. "No one did this. We were chosen. The road chooses. Tonight, it will choose again. We have this entire area surrounded, Harrison continued. Whatever you're planning, it's over. The 7 figures laughed in unison, a sound that made every officer present grip their weapons tighter. Then Thomas Yazzie spoke. You surround nothing. You guard nothing. The highway is everywhere the road touches. Every mile, every marker, every grain of asphalt is a doorway. As if on cue, radios across the scene erupted with panicked calls. Command, we have a situation at marker 62. Missing person at marker 38. Officer down at marker 71. The trap had been reversed. While law enforcement concentrated their forces on the known sites, disappearances were happening all along the highway, beyond their surveillance perimeter. All units respond to your nearest emergency call, Harrison ordered. Then, to the figures before them, you're under arrest. All of you. The 7 figures didn't resist as officers approached with handcuffs. But as soon as the metal touched their wrists, they began to dissolve. Not dramatically, but slowly, like sugar in water. Within seconds, the officers were holding empty handcuffs, the figures completely gone. Aaron's radio crackled. Be gay. We need you at marker 71. It's bad. He drove through the darkness, his mind reeling from what he'd witnessed. At marker 71, he found chaos. 3 civilian vehicles were abandoned, and 2 patrol cars sat empty. Officer Samuel Sosi was on the ground, unconscious but breathing. As the paramedics worked on him, he came to, his eyes wide with terror. They came from below, he gasped. The road opened up, and they pulled everyone down. I tried to stop them, but... He looked at his hands in horror. They were covered in what looked like tar, but it moved slightly, pulsing with its own rhythm. The paramedics rushed Samuel to the helicopter for immediate evacuation. Aaron studied the road where Samuel had indicated. The asphalt looked normal, but when he knelt and touched it, his hand went through as if it were liquid. He jerked back, and the road surface immediately solidified again. By dawn, the full scope of the night's events became clear. 17 people had vanished along a 100-mile stretch of Highway 491. 7 were civilians. 10 were law enforcement officers. The largest single disappearance event in the highway's history. The FBE brought in more resources. Scientists, even consultants from universities who studied anomalous phenomena. Dr. Robert Martinez, a physicist from Los Alamos, conducted extensive tests on the road surface. His findings were disturbing. The asphalt shows unusual molecular properties, he explained to the assembled task force. At certain times, corresponding to specific lunar phases and electromagnetic conditions, it becomes permeable. Not liquid exactly, but permeable to organic matter. You're saying the road itself is taking people? Nathan asked incredulously. I'm saying the road is not what it appears to be. The highway was built in 1956, but it follows an ancient trail that's been used for thousands of years. Ground-penetrating radar shows structures beneath the asphalt, not human-made but organized, purposeful. Aaron thought about Maria's words. The pattern has existed since before your ancestors walked these lands. The investigation took a new direction. Archaeologists were brought in to study the ancient trail systems. They discovered that Highway 491 followed exactly the path of a pre-Columbian trade route, but older still were petroglyphs found in nearby caves that depicted spiral patterns and figures disappearing into lines that resembled roads or paths. Dr. Sarah Itzidi, a Navajo archaeologist and cultural expert, provided crucial context. There are old stories, not often told anymore, about the Hungry Path. A road that demanded payment for safe passage. Travelers would leave offerings, usually livestock, at specific points, if the offering wasn't sufficient. She shrugged. People disappeared. But the highway wasn't built with any offerings in mind, Agent Harrison pointed out. Exactly, Dr. Etcity replied. For 60 years we've been using the path without payment. Maybe it's collecting what it's owed. The task force faced an impossible situation. They couldn't close Highway 491. It was a major artery through the reservation. But they also couldn't allow the disappearances to continue. Some suggested destroying the road and building a new route, but Dr. Martinez warned against it. Based on our readings, the phenomenon exists beneath the road, not because of it. Removing the asphalt might make things worse, not better. We could be looking at an exposed anomaly affecting a much wider area. As the debate continued, Aaron found himself drawn back to the highway at night. He would park at different mile markers, watching, waiting. On the 7th night after the mass disappearance, he saw them again. Not just the recent victims, but dozens of figures, maybe hundreds, walking along the highway in a massive procession. They paid no attention to him, moving with purpose toward some unknown destination. Aaron followed at a distance, his patrol car creeping along at 5 miles per hour. The procession continued for miles, then suddenly turned off the highway into the desert. Aaron parked and followed on foot, keeping his distance. The figures gathered in a massive circle, perhaps 1,000 feet in diameter. At the center, the ground began to glow with a faint blue light. The assembled figures started chanting in that unknown language, their voices creating a harmony that made Aaron's teeth ache. The ground at the center of the circle began to rise, forming a mound, then a hill. Something was pushing up from below, something massive. Aaron watched in horrified fascination as a structure emerged. Not built, but grown, crystalline and organic at once, reaching toward the stars. The structure that emerged from the desert floor defied explanation. It stood 40 feet tall, composed of what looked like black glass fused with organic matter, roots or veins that pulsed with that same blue light. Aaron watched from behind a cluster of rocks as the hundreds of figures circled it, their chanting growing louder, more complex. He tried to photograph it with his phone, but the images came out distorted, showing only darkness with streaks of blue. His radio was dead again, all electronics failing in proximity to the structure. As dawn approached, the structure began to sink back into the earth, and the figures dispersed, walking in different directions across the desert before vanishing like mirages. Aaron marked the location with a pile of stones and returned to the command center. When he reported what he'd seen, Agent Harrison assembled a team to investigate the site immediately. But when they arrived, they found only undisturbed desert. Ground-penetrating radar showed nothing unusual below the surface. Even Aaron's stone marker was gone, as if it had never been placed. "I know what I saw," Aaron insisted. "They're building something or calling something up from below." Dr. Martinez studied Aaron's corrupted phone images, enhancing them with specialized software. "There's definitely something here," he said, pointing to patterns in the distortion. "The electromagnetic interference follows a specific frequency. If we can track that frequency..." Within days, they had set up monitoring stations along the highway, equipped with sensors tuned to detect the unique electromagnetic signature. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then, on the night before the next new moon, every sensor triggered simultaneously. "It's not just one location," Dr. Martinez reported urgently. "The entire highway is showing the signature. It's like the whole road is activating." Emergency meetings were called. The governor was briefed. The decision was made to close Highway 491 for the night of the new moon, citing emergency maintenance. Roadblocks were set up, traffic diverted. The official story was a chemical spill requiring cleanup. Aaron was assigned to one of the roadblocks near Shiprock. As the sun set and darkness claimed the desert, an uncomfortable silence settled over the empty highway. Then, at exactly midnight, the road began to change. The asphalt started to ripple like water, not violently, but gently, as if breathing. Streetlights along the highway, where they existed, flickered and died. In the darkness, a faint blue glow emanated from the road itself, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Aaron watched from behind the roadblock as figures began to emerge from the road. Not just the recent victims, but hundreds of people. Some wore modern clothes, others traditional Navajo dress, still others wore the garments of Spanish colonists from centuries past. They all moved with the same synchronized gait, heading south along the highway. Through binoculars, Aaron spotted Maria Chi among them. On impulse, he left his post and followed on foot, staying off the road itself, moving through the desert parallel to the highway. The procession continued for miles, joined by more figures emerging from the road at regular intervals. They were heading toward Gallup, but before reaching the city limits, the entire procession turned east into the desert. Aaron followed, his flashlight off, navigating by starlight and the faint blue glow that surrounded the walking figures. After 3 miles of rough terrain, they arrived at a canyon Aaron had never seen before, which should have been impossible. He'd studied every topographical map of this area. This canyon shouldn't exist. Yet there it was, a massive gash in the earth, perhaps 200 feet wide and impossibly deep. The figures arranged themselves around the canyon's edge. Their chanting began again, but this time Aaron could almost understand it. Not the words, but the meaning. They were calling something, inviting something, welcoming something home. The ground shook. Not an earthquake, but a rhythmic tremor, like footsteps of something enormous approaching from below. Aaron's every instinct screamed at him to run, but he remained frozen, transfixed by terrible curiosity. From the depths of the canyon, something rose. It wasn't a creature exactly. It was more like a living void, a piece of space that consumed light rather than reflecting it. It had no defined shape, constantly shifting, but Aaron sensed intelligence in its movement, ancient and vast and utterly alien. The figures around the canyon raised their arms, and the entity extended tendrils of nothingness toward them. As each tendril touched a figure, that person became more solid, more real. Their gray skin gained color, their black eyes returned to normal. But only for a moment. Then they collapsed, turning to dust that was immediately absorbed into the canyon. Aaron understood then. These weren't rescued victims being freed. They were being consumed, their essence feeding this thing. The highway didn't take people. It prepared them, transformed them into something this entity could digest. Maria Chi was moving toward the edge, arms raised like the others. Without thinking, Aaron broke from cover and ran toward her. "Maria! Stop!" Every figure turned toward him in unison, hundreds of black eyes reflecting his flashlight beam. The entity in the canyon shifted, and Aaron felt its attention like a physical weight, pressing down on his mind. "You shouldn't be here," Maria said, her voice carrying despite the distance. "You're not ready. You haven't been prepared. Maria, please, your parents, they're devastated. Come back with me." She tilted her head. "I remember them. But that was before I understood. The highway showed me the truth. We're food, Aaron. We've always been food. The old ones knew this, made bargains. The highway is just the dinner table." The entity extended a tendril toward Aaron. He stumbled backward, but it was faster. The moment it touched him, his mind exploded with visions. He saw the earth before humans,
when things like the canyon entity roamed freely. He saw the first peoples discovering these beings, learning to appease them with sacrifices. He saw the bargains made, safe passage in exchange for lives. He saw the modern highway built over ancient feeding grounds, the bargain broken, the entity growing hungry, growing angry. And he saw the future, the entity rising from the canyon,
no longer content with individual offerings. He saw it spreading across the highway like oil, consuming every traveler. He saw it reaching the cities, growing stronger with each life absorbed. He saw the end of everything he knew. The vision released him, and Aaron found himself on his knees, gasping. The entity withdrew its tendril, seemingly satisfied with having shared its intent. Around the canyon, the figures continued their ritual, one by one, turning to dust and being absorbed. "You understand now," Maria said. "It's going to happen whether we help or not. But by serving, by preparing the offerings, we buy time, years, maybe decades." "There has to be another way," Aaron said. "The old way," Maria replied, "regular offerings. Willing sacrifices, or ... quote." She paused, considering. "Or you could try to destroy it. Others have tried. They became the first offerings." Aaron staggered to his feet, backing away from the canyon. The entity's attention had shifted away from him, focused on consuming the prepared offerings. He ran, stumbling through the desert, his mind reeling from what he'd learned. By the time he reached the highway, dawn was breaking. The road looked normal, solid asphalt with no trace of the night's events. His radio worked again, filled with confused chatter from officers reporting that the electromagnetic anomalies had ceased. Aaron drove directly to the command center where he found Agent Harrison and the scientific team analyzing the night's data. The sensors recorded massive energy spikes, but no physical phenomena, Dr. Martinez was saying. "It's as if something huge moved through the area without actually existing in our physical space." Aaron pulled Harrison aside and told her everything. The canyon, the entity, the visions. She listened without interruption, her expression grave. "You're saying this thing is planning to expand beyond the highway?" "Not planning. It's inevitable, unless we find a way to stop it or appease it." Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "The FBI has protocols for situations like this. Anomalous entities that pose existential threats. I need to make some calls." Within hours, a new team arrived, specialists in what they called xenological threats. They interviewed Aaron extensively, analyzed his memories using advanced techniques, and confirmed that the canyon he described didn't appear on any maps or satellite images. Dr. Elizabeth, the lead specialist, explained, "Dimensional intrusions often create temporary geographical features. The canyon exists, but not in our standard three-dimensional space. It's a breakthrough point, where our reality is wearing thin." Plans were made. The highway would be permanently rerouted. The current road would be sealed, buried under concrete and steel. Monitoring stations would be established. It was a massive undertaking that would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, but the alternative was unthinkable. But before any of this could begin, Aaron received a visitor at his home. It was Nathan Yazzie, but something was different about him. His eyes had dark circles around them, and his movements were slightly off, too smooth. "They sent me to talk to you," Nathan said. "The ones who serve. The ones who understand." Aaron's hand moved to his weapon. "Nathan, what did they do to you?" "Nothing I didn't agree to." "I've been having dreams, Aaron, since that night at the roadblock. The entity showed me things like it showed you, but I saw a different path." "What path?" "Coexistence. The old ways worked for thousands of years, a few volunteers each year, people who were ready to go, who chose to go. In exchange, safe passage for everyone else. The entity isn't evil, it's just hungry, and it's been starving for 60 years. We can't go back to human sacrifice, Nathan. Can't we? How many people die on the highways every year anyway? Thousands. What if some of those deaths served a purpose? What if they bought safety for millions of others? Aaron stared at his partner, his friend, horrified by how reasonable he sounded. Listen to yourself. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about survival. The entity is going to feed either way. We can either control how and when, or we can let it loose on the world. Nathan stood to leave, pausing at the door. Think about it, Aaron. The new moon is in 28 days. The entity will be hungry again. If there aren't proper offerings, it will take what it wants, and next time, it won't stop at 17 people. After Nathan left, Aaron sat in his dark living room, wrestling with an impossible decision. He could report Nathan's visit, expose the network of people apparently serving the entity. But would that stop it, or just delay the inevitable? He thought about Maria's parents still waiting for news of their daughter. He thought about all the families who'd lost loved ones to the highway over the decades. He thought about the vision the entity had shown him, cities consumed, civilization ending in darkness. In the end, Aaron made his choice. He drove to the command center and told Agent Harrison about Nathan's visit, about the network of servants, about the proposed return to the old ways. Harrison listened grimly, then made her own decision. We're accelerating the containment protocol. The highway closes tomorrow, permanently, and we're going to find everyone connected to this entity, anyone who's been influenced, anyone who's serving it. This ends now. The operation was swift and decisive. Within 48 hours, Highway 491 was closed. Concrete barriers were erected, the asphalt was torn up, and the ground beneath was sealed with a composite material designed to block electromagnetic anomalies. The official story was environmental contamination requiring extensive remediation. Nathan and 12 others were detained for psychiatric evaluation. They all showed similar symptoms: altered brain chemistry, unusual electromagnetic signatures in their bodies, and a shared delusion about serving an ancient entity. They were placed in a specialized facility for treatment and observation. The new highway was built 10 miles to the west, avoiding the ancient trail entirely. For the first year, there were no incidents, no disappearances, no abandoned vehicles, no mysterious figures walking the desert at night. The scientific team monitoring the old highway route reported no anomalies. Aaron transferred to a different district, unable to drive those roads without remembering what he'd seen. He tried to convince himself that it was over, that the entity was contained or had moved on. But sometimes, on nights when there was no moon, he would dream of the canyon that didn't exist, of the thing that lived in its depths, and of Maria Chi's final words. It's going to happen whether we help or not. 3 years later, Aaron received a call from Agent Harrison. Her voice was tense, worried. "Aaron, we have a problem. The disappearances have started again." "Where?" "The old highway is sealed." "Not the highway, the new road. 3 people in the last month, all on the night of the new moon. Same pattern. Abandoned vehicles, footprints that end suddenly." Aaron felt his blood run cold. It found another way. Or it was never really contained. "Aaron, we need you back. You're the only one who's had direct contact with the entity and maintained your sanity. Will you help us?" Aaron looked out his window at the peaceful streets of his new town, far from Highway 491, far from the desert and its ancient hungers. He thought he'd escaped, but some things, he realized, you can't run from. Some things follow you, patient and eternal, waiting for the right moment to feed again. "I'll be there tomorrow," he said, already knowing that this was far from over. The entity had been patient for thousands of years. It could afford to wait a little longer, to find new paths, new ways to feed. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars and the depths of the earth, it was stirring, hungry, and ready to reclaim what it had always considered its own. The highway might be gone, but the hunger remained. And Aaron Begay, officer of the Navajo Nation Police, would have to face it once more. But this time, he wondered if anyone would be strong enough to stop it, or if they were all just delaying the inevitable feast. As he packed his bags for the journey back to the desert, Aaron's radio crackled to life, which was impossible since it wasn't even turned on. Through the static came Maria Chi's voice, distant but clear. "The pattern continues, Aaron. It always continues. We'll be waiting for you." The radio fell silent, and Aaron stood alone in his room, knowing that his fight against the darkness was just beginning. The entity hadn't been defeated. It had simply been teaching them all a lesson, that some hungers are older than roads, older than civilization, and patient enough to outlast any barrier humanity could build. Tomorrow, he would return to the desert. Tomorrow, he would face the ancient hunger once more. Tonight, he would pray to gods both old and new that this time, somehow, they would find a way to satisfy it without losing their souls in the process. The drive back to New Mexico took Aaron through landscapes he'd tried to forget. Red rock formations that looked like ancient sentinels, vast stretches of desert that seemed to breathe with their own life, and always the highways that cut through it all like black veins. He'd been gone 3 years, but as he crossed the state line, it felt like he'd never left. Agent Harrison met him at the Gallup Field office. She'd aged visibly since their last meeting, gray streaking through her dark hair, lines etched deeper around her eyes. The weight of managing an impossible situation showed in every gesture. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading him to a secure briefing room. "The situation has escalated beyond what we reported on the phone." The room was filled with maps, photographs, and data charts. Dr. Martinez was there, along with several faces Aaron didn't recognize. One man, elderly and wearing traditional Navajo jewelry, stood out among the government officials. "This is Samuel Benally," Harrison introduced. "He's a Hatali, a medicine man. Given the unique nature of our situation, we've expanded our consultant pool." Samuel studied Aaron with dark, knowing eyes. "I remember you, Officer Begay. Your grandmother brought you to a ceremony when you were young. You've been touched by the old darkness before." Aaron was startled. He did vaguely remember a ceremony from childhood, something his grandmother had insisted on after he'd had terrible nightmares for weeks. But he'd never connected it to any of this. "Mr. Benally has provided us with historical context we were missing," Harrison continued. "The entity we're dealing with, his people have a name for it." "Yo Naldlushi Chidi," Samuel said softly, "the hunger that walks below. My grandfather's grandfather knew of it. There are songs about it, ceremonies to keep it sleeping. But when the white man's road was built," he shrugged, "the ceremonies were forgotten. The offerings stopped, and it woke up." Dr. Martinez pulled up a holographic display showing the Southwest United States. Red dots marked disappearance sites, and they weren't limited to the old Highway 491 anymore. They spread across multiple states, following the interstate highway system like an infection. "It's not just using roads anymore," Martinez explained. "It's learned our transportation network. Every highway, every major road that connects to the old route, it can access them all." Aaron studied the pattern. It's spreading from the origin point, like roots from a tree. Exactly. And at the current rate of expansion, within 5 years it will have access to every major highway in North America. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Aaron asked, "What about the people who were taken?" "The ones I saw at the canyon. Some of them were from decades ago," Samuel answered. "They exist between worlds now. Not alive, not dead. The hunger uses them as extensions of itself, scouts and gatherers. They're trapped until the entity is destroyed or..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Properly appeased." "We're not going back to human sacrifice," Harrison stated firmly. "Then you need another solution," Samuel replied. And quickly. "The new moon is in 3 days. Based on the pattern, we're expecting multiple disappearances across 5 states." Aaron looked at the maps again. "What if we're approaching this wrong? We've been trying to contain it, block it, stop it from spreading. But what if we need to communicate with it?" "It's not exactly chatty," Harrison said dryly. "Everyone who's had direct contact either disappears or ends up like the officers we have in psychiatric hold." "Except me," Aaron pointed out. "It showed me visions but didn't take me. Maybe because I wasn't afraid, or maybe..." He turned to Samuel. "You said I was touched by the old darkness before. What did you mean?" Samuel was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. "When you were 7, you wandered into a place of power during a family camping trip. You were missing for 3 days. When you were found, you had no memory of what happened, but you spoke in old languages, described things no child should know. Your grandmother recognized the signs. The darkness had marked you, but not taken you. She brought you to me for cleansing." Aaron had no memory of this, but something deep in his mind stirred. A flash of darkness, a sense of vast emptiness, voices that weren't voices. "If I was marked before," Aaron said slowly, "maybe that's why it communicated with me instead of taking me. Maybe I can reach it again." Harrison shook her head. "That's too dangerous." "We don't know. We don't know anything," Aaron interrupted. "We're fighting something we don't understand with tools that don't work. Let me try." After hours of debate, a plan was formed. Aaron would return to the original site on Highway 491 during the new moon, accompanied by a full scientific team and security detail. Samuel would perform protective ceremonies. They would attempt controlled contact with the entity. The night of the new moon came too quickly. The old highway had been excavated, the concrete barriers removed to allow access. Aaron stood at mile marker 55, wearing monitoring equipment that tracked his vitals and brain activity. Samuel had painted symbols on his hands and forehead with white clay, chanting in Navajo as he worked. "These won't stop the hunger if it truly wants you," Samuel warned, "but they mark you as one who walks between worlds with purpose, not as prey." At exactly midnight, the electromagnetic sensors spiked. The air grew thick, oppressive. And then, just as before, the road began to ripple. Aaron walked forward, stepping onto the liquid asphalt. Instead of solid ground, his foot sank slightly, as if walking on thick mud. "Readings are off the charts." Dr. Martinez's voice crackled through Aaron's earpiece. "Your biorhythms are syncing with the EM field." Aaron continued walking, each step taking him deeper into something that wasn't quite reality. The world around him began to fade, replaced by that blue-tinged darkness he remembered from his visions. And then he was elsewhere, not the highway, not the desert, but a space between spaces. The entity was there, not visible but present, a vast intelligence that pressed against his mind. Aaron didn't resist, letting it examine him, remembering him. "You return," it said without words. The marked one. I need to understand, Aaron spoke aloud, though he wasn't sure if his physical body was speaking or just his consciousness. What are you? What do you want? Images flooded his mind. The entity was old, older than Earth itself. It existed in spaces between dimensions, feeding on life energy to maintain its existence. It had been trapped here eons ago, bound to this place by something Aaron couldn't comprehend. The roads, the paths humans traveled, these created weaknesses in the barriers holding it. Hunger, it conveyed. Always hunger. Your kind broke the compact. No offerings, no respect. So, I take what I need. The compact, the old agreements with the native peoples. They understood. Feed me willing souls, those ready for journey beyond, and I sleep. Ignore me, and I wake. Starve me, and I hunt. But we can't go back to that. There has to be another way. The entity's attention pressed harder, almost painful. It showed Aaron more visions. Not the past this time, but possibilities. It could fully manifest in this reality, consume everything. Or it could return to sleeping if properly fed, or... Aaron saw a third option. The entity could be redirected, pointed toward a different food source. Not human lives, but something else. Energy itself. What if we could feed you without killing people? Aaron asked. Pure energy, electricity, nuclear power. Would that sustain you? The entity considered this. Energy is energy. Life force is richest, but perhaps... Show me. Aaron was suddenly back on the highway, gasping, on his knees. The team rushed forward, but he waved them off. I need to talk to Martinez, and get me someone from the Department of Energy. Now. What followed were the most intense 72 hours of Aaron's life. Scientists, engineers, and government officials worked around the clock to develop a plan. If the entity could feed on pure energy, they could create a controlled feeding system. A nuclear reactor could be modified, its output directed through the same electromagnetic frequencies the entity used to manifest. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was their only option. The test was scheduled for the next new moon. A decommissioned reactor in Nevada was prepared, its systems modified according to specifications that came partly from science and partly from Aaron's interpreted visions. Samuel Benally and 3 other medicine men would perform ceremonies to help bridge the physical and spiritual aspects of the attempt. As the appointed night arrived, Aaron stood in the reactor control room, watching dozens of technicians prepare for something none of them fully understood. Agent Harrison stood beside him, tension radiating from every muscle. If this doesn't work, she began, then we're no worse off than we are now. Aaron finished. It's spreading either way. At least this gives us a chance. The ceremony began at sunset. The medicine men chanted, their voices echoing through the facility via speakers. As darkness fell and the new moon rose invisible in the sky, the electromagnetic sensors began their familiar spike. Initiating contact protocol, Dr. Martinez announced. The reactor hummed to life, its energy output carefully modulated to match the entity's frequency. On the monitors, they could see the manifestation beginning. A distortion in the air above the reactor core, growing larger, more defined. Aaron felt it in his mind, the entity's presence. It was curious, cautious. He pressed his hand against the observation window, the symbols Samuel had painted glowing faintly. Try it, he said aloud, knowing the entity could hear him. Take the energy. Feed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the reactor's output levels began dropping rapidly. The entity was feeding, drawing power directly from the nuclear reaction. The distortion above the core pulsed with that familiar blue light, growing brighter as it consumed more energy. It's working, Martinez breathed. Energy consumption is increasing, but controlled. The entity is taking what it needs without destabilizing the reactor. For an hour, they watched as the entity fed. Then, gradually, the consumption slowed. The distortion began to fade. And in Aaron's mind, he felt something he'd never expected from such an alien being: satisfaction. Acceptable, the entity conveyed. This will suffice. The compact is reformed. Feed me thus, and I will sleep. Ignore me again. The threat didn't need to be completed. Aaron understood. They had bought peace, but it required maintenance, regular feedings, respect for the ancient hunger that dwelt beneath their feet. As the connection faded, Aaron saw one more vision. The taken ones, Maria, Thomas, Daniel, and all the others, they were being released. Not to life, for their bodies were long gone, but to death. True death. Peace. Across the Southwest, families reported strange dreams that night. They saw their missing loved ones, whole and healthy, saying goodbye. Closure after years of uncertainty. 3 months after the Nevada Accord, Aaron received a call that would change everything he thought he knew about the entity. It came at 3 a.m., his phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. The caller ID showed Agent Harrison's emergency line. "Aaron, we have a situation. How quickly can you get to Flagstaff?" "What's happening?" Aaron asked, already pulling on his uniform. "We've had a breach. Not the entity, something else. But it's connected. The team that went to investigate hasn't reported back in 6 hours." Aaron made the drive to Flagstaff in record time, arriving at a nondescript office building that served as the regional headquarters for anomalous investigations. Harrison met him in the parking lot, her face grim. "At 9 p.m. last night, our sensors detected an energy signature similar to the entity, but different, like a different frequency of the same phenomenon. It appeared near Walnut Canyon, lasted for approximately 3 minutes, then vanished." "And the team?" 4 agents, led by Nathan Yazzie. They went to investigate at midnight. Their last communication was at 12:47 a.m. They reported finding something, then nothing. Aaron felt a chill. Nathan had recovered from his time under the entity's influence, but he'd never been quite the same. More sensitive to electromagnetic fields, more attuned to things others couldn't perceive. If something had happened to him and his team. "I'll need Samuel Benelli," Aaron said, "and whatever protective equipment we have." "Already on his way." "Aaron, there's something else. The energy signature, it wasn't random. It formed a pattern, a message." She showed him a tablet displaying the electromagnetic readings. The spikes and valleys formed shapes that looked almost like writing, but in no language Aaron recognized. Except, something about it seemed familiar, tickling the edge of memory from his childhood incident that he still couldn't fully recall. Samuel arrived within the hour, studied the pattern, and went very still. "This is old writing. Older than the Navajo, older than the Pueblo. It's from the time before, when the first humans made their compacts with the things that dwelt in the spaces between." "Can you read it?" Harrison asked. "Not fully. But this symbol," he pointed to a recurring pattern, "means sibling or kin, and this one means wake or return." Aaron understood immediately. "There's another one, another entity. Or more," Samuel said quietly. "The hunger that walks below spoke of being trapped here. It never said it was trapped alone." They assembled a small team. Aaron, Samuel, 2 FBI agents with anomaly experience, and a paramedic trained in exotic injury treatment. The drive to Walnut Canyon took 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. As they approached the coordinates where Nathan's team had last reported, their equipment began malfunctioning. Electromagnetic interference is off the charts, one of the agents reported. But it's not like the entity's signature. This is sharper, more aggressive. They found Nathan's vehicles parked at a trailhead, abandoned but undamaged. The trail led into the canyon, winding between ancient cliff dwellings that had been home to the Sinagua people centuries ago. Aaron had visited this place as a tourist once. Now, in the pre-dawn darkness, it felt like entering a tomb. 50 yards down the trail, they found the first sign of Nathan's team, a dropped flashlight still on, its beam pointing into the canyon depths. Then they heard it, a low humming sound, almost below the range of human hearing, that seemed to come from the rock itself. "Stop," Samuel commanded, holding up his hand. He knelt, touching the ground, then pulled back as if burned. "It's here." Different from the hunger, but related. This one doesn't feed on life. It feeds on memory. "Memory?" Aaron asked. "The electromagnetic patterns of thought, experience, consciousness itself. It can drain a person's entire life experience, leaving them." He paused, searching for words. Empty, alive but hollow. They continued more carefully, Samuel leading with chanted protections. The humming grew louder, and then they saw light ahead. Not natural light, but that familiar blue glow, though tinged with something else. Purple, perhaps, or ultraviolet at the edge of perception. The trail opened into a natural amphitheater in the canyon. At its center, 4 figures sat in a circle, cross-legged and motionless. Nathan's team. They were breathing. Aaron could see their chests rising and falling, but their eyes were open and completely vacant, staring at nothing. Above them, the air itself seemed torn. Not the liquid distortion of the hunger's manifestation, but an actual rip in space, edges crackling with that purple-blue energy. And through the tear, Aaron could see something. A vast space filled with floating fragments of light, each one flickering with images. Memories, he realized. Thousands. Millions of stolen memories drifting in an alien void. "Nathan?" Aaron called out, but his former partner didn't respond, didn't even blink. Something emerged from the tear. Not the formless mass of the hunger, but a more defined shape, crystalline and organic simultaneously, like a nervous system made of living glass. It moved with purpose, extending tendrils toward the team. "You taste of the deeper one." A voice spoke directly into Aaron's mind, different from the hunger's communication. Clearer, more articulate. "You have touched our sleeping sibling. How interesting." "Who are you?" Aaron asked aloud. "What do you want?" "I am the archive of forgotten moments. I collect what your kind discards, memories you suppress, experiences you forget, dreams you don't remember upon waking. But these vessels," it gestured toward Nathan's team, "they came full of fresh memories, so much richer than the scraps I usually feed on." "Release them," Aaron demanded. "Why? They are not harmed. They simply aren't. No pain, no fear, no suffering. They exist in perfect emptiness. Some would consider it a mercy." Samuel stepped forward, his chanting growing louder. The entity seemed to notice him for the first time, its crystalline form shifting to focus on the medicine man. "Ah, a keeper of the old ways. You remember the first compact, don't you? Your ancestors knew us, all of us. The hunger that walks below, myself, the burning eye, the void of echoes. We all had our places, our purposes, our prices. The compacts were broken," Samuel said. "Your time here is over." "Over? We are eternal.
We were here before your sun burned. We will be here after it dies. The compacts weren't broken. They were forgotten. And now you scramble to remember, to appease one of us while the others wake. Aaron's mind raced. Others? How many? 7 entered this reality when the barriers were thin. 7 were trapped when your world solidified. The hunger woke first, being the simplest, the most basic. I wake now, drawn by the electromagnetic noise of your technology. The others will follow. What do you want? Harrison asked, having moved up beside Aaron. The hunger agreed to controlled feedings. What would satisfy you? The archive pulsed with what might have been amusement. I want what I've always wanted. Experiences, memories, the essence of consciousness. But unlike my sibling, I don't need to destroy to feed. I can copy, duplicate, preserve. Give me access to your records, your databases, your collected human experience, and I will be content to browse rather than harvest. It was an impossible request, and a tempting offer simultaneously. Aaron looked at Nathan and his team, sitting vacant-eyed in their circle, and knew they had to try something. If we give you access to databases, you'll release them? All their memories intact? Their memories are here. The archive gestured to the tear in space. Beautiful, organized, cataloged. I could return them, yes, but why would I? They are the first complete collections I've had in centuries. Samuel spoke again, his voice carrying an authority Aaron had never heard from him before. Because, if you don't, we will wake the others ourselves. All of them. And when 7 entities are fighting for resources in the same reality, none of you will get what you need. The archive's crystalline form went still. You wouldn't. You couldn't. You don't even know where they sleep. Don't I? Samuel pulled out an old leather journal, its pages yellow with age. My grandfather's grandfather was one of the last to know all 7 names, all 7 locations. The knowledge was hidden, not lost. It was a bluff, Aaron realized, but a convincing one. The archive pulsed with agitation, its tendrils withdrawing slightly from Nathan's team. You would risk everything? Your entire world? To save 4 of our people? Yes, Aaron said firmly. But we don't have to be enemies. You said it yourself. You can copy memories without destroying the original. Work with us, like the hunger has agreed to do. The negotiation took hours. The sun rose over the canyon walls, painting the ancient cliff dwellings in shades of gold and amber while they hammered out terms. The archive would release Nathan's team with their memories intact. In exchange, it would be given access to specific historical databases, museums, libraries, archaeological records. Nothing personal, nothing that could violate individual privacy, but enough cultural memory to satisfy its appetite. As the agreement was reached, the archive began returning the stolen memories. One by one, Nathan and his team gasped, their eyes focusing, awareness returning. Nathan looked up at Aaron with tears streaming down his face. I saw everything, he whispered. Every memory I'd ever forgotten. My first steps, my mother singing to me, the day my grandfather died. It was all there, all preserved. The archive withdrew into its tear in space, but before it sealed, it left them with a warning. The others are stirring. The electromagnetic noise of your civilization, the nuclear energy you've learned to harness, it's like a beacon to us. The burning eye will wake next, within the year. It feeds on possibility, potential futures, unmade choices. Prepare yourselves. As they helped Nathan's team back to the vehicles, Aaron noticed Samuel writing furiously in his journal. "What are you documenting?" "Everything. The old knowledge isn't enough anymore. We need new wisdom, new ceremonies for a world where ancient hungers have cell phone signals and nuclear reactors. Your science and our traditions, they need to merge completely if we're going to survive what's coming." Back at headquarters, the aftermath was chaotic. 4 agents recovering from having their consciousness temporarily archived, a new entity to monitor and feed, and the promise of more to come. Harrison looked exhausted as she briefed her superiors via secure video link. "Sir, we need resources. A lot more resources. If there are really 7 of these things and they're all waking up." Aaron left her to the bureaucracy and went to check on Nathan. His old partner was in the medical ward, physically fine but psychologically shaken. "It wasn't traumatic," Nathan explained. "That's what's so disturbing. Having all your memories taken should be traumatic, but it felt peaceful, like sinking into warm water. I can see how people could choose it, choose to be archived rather than face reality. But you came back, because you brought me back." "But Aaron, while I was in there, in that space between spaces, I saw other memories, older ones, from people who encountered these entities centuries ago." Nathan grabbed Aaron's arm. "They're not invaders. They're refugees." "What?" "The 7 entities. They're running from something. They got trapped here not by accident, but because they were fleeing something worse, something that consumed their reality entirely. And if they're all waking up now, it might mean that whatever they were running from has found them." Aaron felt the blood drain from his face. If entities as powerful as the Hunger and the Archive were running from something. His phone buzzed. Dr. Martinez, calling from the Nevada facility. "Aaron, you need to see this. The Hunger. It's acting strange. The feeding cycle isn't due for another 2 weeks, but it's manifesting anyway. And it seems agitated." Aaron made it to Nevada in 3 hours, using lights and sirens most of the way. The facility was in lockdown when he arrived, armed guards at every checkpoint. Inside the control room, Martinez showed him the readings. "It started an hour ago. The entity manifested without being called, and it's been pulsing this pattern." Aaron recognized it immediately. It was similar to the message the Archive had left, but more urgent, more desperate. "It's afraid," Aaron said. "Something's got it spooked." Samuel arrived soon after, took one look at the patterns, and confirmed Aaron's suspicion. "It's a warning. The Hunger is trying to warn us." "About what?" "I need to commune with it directly," Samuel said. "The patterns aren't enough." "I need full contact." It was dangerous. No one had attempted direct mental contact with the Hunger since Aaron's controlled encounter. But Samuel insisted, and given the circumstances, they agreed. They set up in the reactor chamber itself, Samuel sitting cross-legged on the floor with Aaron beside him for support. As the entity manifested, Samuel began chanting, not in Navajo but in something older, more primal. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. The lights flickered and died, leaving only the blue glow of the entity's presence. And then Samuel gasped, his eyes rolling back, his body going rigid. Aaron caught him as he started to fall, holding his friend as Samuel's consciousness touched something vast and ancient and terrified. For 10 minutes, Samuel was gone, his body present but his mind elsewhere. When he finally returned, gasping and shaking, his first words chilled everyone in the room. 3 days. We have 3 days. Until what? Harrison demanded. Until the destroyer arrives. The thing that consumed their reality, that forced them to flee here. It's been searching for them across dimensions, and our nuclear test, our feeding of the Hunger, our interaction with the Archive, we've created a beacon it can follow. Can we stop it? Samuel laughed bitterly. Stop it?
We can't even comprehend it. The 7 entities here, as powerful as they are, they're just survivors who barely escaped. The destroyer doesn't feed on life or memory or possibility. It feeds on existence itself. It unmakes reality. The room fell silent. Finally, Aaron spoke. Then we need all 7. If they ran from this thing before, they might know how to run again, or maybe together, they're strong enough to fight. Wake the other 5 entities? That's insane, Harrison protested. Is it more insane than sitting here waiting to be unmade? The debate that followed was fierce but short. In the end, practicality won. If the destroyer was coming regardless, their only chance was to unite with the entities already here. Samuel's journal contained locations for 3 of the remaining 5. The Burning Eye, dormant beneath Meteor Crater, the Void of Echoes, sleeping in Carlsbad Caverns, and the Keeper of Unspoken Names, buried under the ruins of Chaco Canyon. The other 2 locations had been lost to time. They had 3 days to wake and negotiate with 3 more entities, hope the other 2 woke on their own, and somehow convince 7 incomprehensible beings to work together with humanity to face something even worse. Aaron stood in the desert that night, looking up at stars that might not exist in 72 hours, and thought about the strange path that had led him here. From a simple missing persons case to standing at the potential end of everything. His phone rang. It was his sister in Phoenix, calling to chat about normal things. Her kids, their mother's birthday next month, the funny thing that happened at work. Aaron listened, treasuring the mundane normalcy of it, not telling her that in 3 days none of it might matter. After the call, he found Samuel preparing for the journey to Meteor Crater. The old medicine man looked tired, but determined. My grandfather used to say that every ending is also a beginning, Samuel said. Maybe this isn't about stopping the destroyer. Maybe it's about becoming something new, something that can survive it. Human and entity merged, or transformed entirely. Evolution doesn't ask permission, Aaron. It just presents necessity and sees who adapts. They set out before dawn, 3 teams heading to 3 locations. Aaron led the team to Chaco Canyon, the place where the ancestral Puebloans had built their great houses and apparently sealed away one of the 7 entities. The ruins were closed to tourists, official story being archaeological preservation. The real reason became clear as they descended into a kiva that had been excavated deeper than any public record showed. At its bottom, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, was a stone that wasn't stone. It was crystallized space, frozen reality. Aaron placed his marked hand on it and spoke the words Samuel had taught him. The stone began to crack, and through the cracks leaked sound. Every word never spoken, every name never given, every thought never expressed. The keeper of unspoken names emerged like smoke given form, shapeless but dense with potential meaning. Why? It asked without asking, the question appearing in Aaron's mind fully formed. Why wake what wishes to sleep? Because something worse is coming. Something that will unmake us all unless we stand together. The entity considered this for a long moment that felt like hours. Then the destroyer. It has found us. After eons of hiding, we are discovered. Very well. I will stand with you if only because existence, even painful existence, is preferable to unbeing. 1 down, 2 to go, and less than 60 hours remaining. The other teams reported similar success. The Burning Eye had negotiated hard, demanding access to quantum computers to feed on calculated possibilities. The Void of Echoes wanted sound. All of it, every recording humanity had ever made. As the entities gathered, drawn to the Nevada facility by means beyond human understanding, Aaron watched them interact. These beings that could unmake reality with a thought, reduced to refugees planning a last stand. With 36 hours remaining, the fifth entity woke on its own, the weaver of forgotten truths, emerging from beneath the salt flats of Utah. It came without being called, drawn by the gathering of its siblings. 5 of 7, it communicated to them all. Not enough. The destroyer comes as 7 that is 1. We must be 7 that are 1 to match it. Where are the other 2? Aaron asked. Lost, hidden too well, unless... The weaver turned its attention to Aaron, studying him with senses that saw past flesh and bone to something deeper. You, the marked one. You carry traces of the 7th, from when you were young, when you wandered into its domain and survived. Aaron's missing memories from childhood, they were the key. But to find the 7th, he would need to remember what his mind had blocked out for its own protection. Samuel prepared a ceremony using techniques both ancient and modern. They hooked Aaron to monitoring equipment while Samuel guided him into the deepest trance of his life, past the barriers his young mind had erected, into memories that had been deliberately forgotten. And Aaron remembered. He was 7, camping with his family near Spider Rock in Canyon de Chelly. He'd wandered off, following what he thought was a rabbit but was actually a projection, a lure. He'd found a cave that wasn't on any map, descended into darkness that was more than absence of light. The 7th had no name humans could speak. It was the space between heartbeats, the pause between thoughts, the silence between words. It had examined young Aaron, found him interesting, a human child with potential to bridge worlds, and marked him before releasing him. Now, 28 years later, Aaron knew where to find it. With 18 hours remaining, Aaron stood at the entrance to that impossible cave, the other 6 entities manifesting around him in forms that hurt to perceive directly. Together, they descended. The phone rang at 4:17 a.m., waking Officer Marcus Yazzie, who was sleeping in his patrol car. He was parked at a rest stop near Window Rock, catching some sleep between shifts. This was a common practice in a region covering an area as large as the eastern states with very few personnel. Unit 12, we need you at Shadow Mesa. Possible 10-54, livestock mutilation reported at the Totachin Ranch. Marcus rubbed his eyes, started the engine. Unit 12 responding. ETA 40 minutes. Shadow Mesa sat on the edge of the Navajo Nation, where the reservation bordered BLM land and private ranches. It was a place of contradictions. Traditional hogans next to modern prefabs. Ancient petroglyphs overlooking cell phone towers, and lately, a place where strange things had been happening with increasing frequency. The drive took him through sleeping towns and across empty desert, the pre-dawn darkness absolute except for his headlights cutting through the void. Shadow Mesa loomed ahead, a massive, flat-topped mountain that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Even in daylight, it had an oppressive quality that made people unconsciously speed up when driving past. The Totachin Ranch sat at the mesa's base, a modest operation running about 200 head of cattle. Marcus found the owner, Robert Totachin, standing by a corral with a shotgun, his weathered face grim in the patrol car's headlights. Officer Yazzie, Robert nodded. It's in the back pasture. 3rd one this month. Marcus followed him through gates and across dusty ground until they reached the carcass. His flashlight beam revealed what remained of a cow, and Marcus had to suppress his immediate revulsion. The animal had been precisely dissected, organs removed with surgical precision, hide peeled back in perfect squares, bones exposed and somehow bleached white despite the death being recent, according to Robert. When did you find it? About 2 hours ago. Heard the dogs going crazy, came out to check. Found this. Robert spat tobacco juice into the dirt, just like the others. No tracks, no blood trail, no predator marks, just this. Marcus photographed everything, measured the incisions, documented the scene. He'd been a cop for 15 years, seen plenty of dead livestock. Coyote kills, mountain lion attacks, even the occasional poacher. This was different. The precision disturbed him more than gore would have. You said this is the third one? Third on my land. But talk to anyone around Shadow Mesa. The Benally family lost 5 sheep last week. Same thing. The Johnsons, they're the white folks who bought the old Bigay place, lost 2 horses. Horses? Marcus looked up sharply. Horses were expensive, and killing them suggested either serious predators or serious criminals. Cut up just like this. Cops from Gallup came out, said it was probably cultists. But Officer Yazzie... Robert's voice dropped. My grandfather used to tell stories about Shadow Mesa. Said there were things up there that shouldn't be disturbed. Old things, angry things. Marcus would normally dismiss such talk, but after 15 years policing the reservation, he'd learned not to discount the old stories entirely. Too many times they'd contained kernels of truth wrapped in generations of oral tradition. I'll file a report, get an investigation started. In the meantime, maybe bring your livestock closer to the house at night. Robert laughed bitterly. Already tried that. Found one cut up right in the corral next to my bedroom window. Never heard a thing. As the sun rose, painting Shadow Mesa in shades of rust and gold, Marcus expanded his investigation. He visited the Benally Ranch, the Johnson property, talked to a dozen other residents. The stories were consistent, precisely mutilated animals. No evidence of how it was done, no sounds in the night. At the Johnson Ranch, he met Susan Johnson, a veterinarian who'd moved from Denver 5 years ago. She showed him photos she'd taken of her horses. I've performed hundreds of necropsies, she said. These cuts, they're beyond surgical. Look at this. She pointed to a photo showing exposed muscle tissue. The cellular structure at the incision points shows signs of extreme heat, like a laser cutter. But there's no charring, no cauterization. It's impossible. Maybe someone has advanced equipment. Officer, I've consulted with colleagues at veterinary colleges. This is beyond any equipment we know of. And there's something else. She pulled up more photos on her laptop. The organs that were removed, they're the same in every case. Reproductive organs, specific glands, particular sections of the digestive system. Someone or something is collecting specific biological samples. That gave Marcus pause. Samples? For what? I wish I knew. But it's systematic, methodical. This isn't random mutilation, it's harvesting. Marcus spent the rest of the day interviewing witnesses, documenting cases, building a timeline. The mutilations had started 6 weeks ago, always within a 5-mile radius of Shadow Mesa. Always at night, though no one ever saw or heard anything. No vehicles, no lights, no trace evidence except the mutilated remains. That evening, he parked his patrol car on a rise overlooking the affected area and called his supervisor, Lieutenant Rebecca Sosi, in Window Rock. I need additional resources out here, he said after explaining the situation. This is beyond standard livestock theft or vandalism. Marcus, I understand your concern, but we're stretched thin. The feds are breathing down our necks about drug trafficking on the southern routes, and I've got half my force dealing with that. Lieutenant, whatever's happening here, it's escalating. We've got over 20 animals killed in 6 weeks. People are scared. There was a pause. I'll see what I can do. Maybe we can get state police involved, or Fish and Wildlife, if we can make it a poaching case. In the meantime, maintain a presence, reassure the community. As night fell, Marcus decided to stake out the area. He positioned himself on a hill with good sight lines to several ranches, night vision binoculars at the ready. The desert was quiet except for distant coyote calls and the whisper of wind through sage. At 11:47 p.m., his radio crackled with static, then died completely. His cell phone showed no signal. The patrol car's electronics flickered and went dark. Marcus sat in the sudden silence, hair rising on the back of his neck. Then he saw it. A light in the sky, brilliant white tinged with blue, moving silently over Shadow Mesa. It wasn't a plane, no navigation lights, no engine sound. It wasn't a helicopter, too smooth, too fast. It descended toward the mesa's flat top and disappeared from view. Marcus tried to start his car. Nothing. He grabbed his handheld radio. Dead. He was about to hike toward the mesa when another light appeared, and this one at ground level, moving between the ranches with impossible speed. It would appear at one location, vanish, then reappear hundreds of yards away instantly. He raised his binoculars, trying to track the light, and caught a glimpse of something that made him lower them immediately, blinking hard, then look again. In the brief moment he'd seen it clearly, the light had revealed a shape. Tall, impossibly thin, moving in ways that human joints shouldn't allow. The light vanished. 30 seconds later, his electronics came back online. Radio crackling with routine chatter, phone showing full signal. Marcus sat frozen, trying to process what he'd seen. In 15 years of law enforcement, including time in Afghanistan before joining the force, he'd never encountered anything he couldn't explain. He drove to the nearest ranch, the Benally place, and found the family awake, huddled in their living room. "You saw it too," old James Benally said. It wasn't a question. "I saw something. Lights." "Not just lights," James's daughter Patricia said. "We saw them, the tall ones. They were in the corral, standing over the sheep. Dad tried to go out, but the door wouldn't open. Nothing would work. Phones, lights, even the generator stopped." Marcus documented their statements, but what could he put in an official report? That he'd seen aliens? That something was visiting ranches at night with technology beyond human capability? By dawn, another mutilation was reported. A prize bull at a ranch he'd been watching, killed and dissected while he'd been distracted by the lights. The rancher, Tom Begay, was ex-military like Marcus, not given to panic. But his hands shook as he showed Marcus the carcass. "I was Special Forces," Tom said quietly. "Did 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. I've seen things that would make most people lose their minds. But this... Officer, what are we dealing with?" Marcus didn't have an answer. But as he looked up at Shadow Mesa, now benign-looking in the morning light, he knew he needed to find one. Whatever was happening here was beyond normal law enforcement, but it was his job to protect these people. That afternoon, he made a decision that would change everything. He would climb Shadow Mesa after dark, go to where he'd seen the light descend. It was dangerous, possibly foolish, but the community needed answers. He prepared carefully, full tactical gear, multiple recording devices, emergency beacons. He told no one except leaving a sealed letter for Lieutenant Sosi explaining his plan, to be opened if he didn't report in by dawn. As the sun set behind Shadow Mesa, casting long shadows across the desert, Marcus began his ascent. The trail was rough, barely visible in places, winding through ancient juniper trees and past weathered sandstone formations. Every sound made him pause. The scatter of loose rocks, the call of a night bird, the rustle of wind through dried grass. Halfway up, his electronics started glitching again. His flashlight flickered, dimmed, then died. His radio produced only static, but the moon was bright enough to see by, and Marcus pressed on. Near the top, he found something that stopped him cold. A section of ground that had been fused into glass, forming a perfect circle 30 feet in diameter. The moonlight reflected off its surface, creating an ethereal glow. At the circle's center, the mesa's sandstone had been carved or melted into strange symbols that hurt to look at directly. Marcus photographed everything with a mechanical film camera he'd brought as backup, the only device still working. As he did, he became aware of a presence, not seen but felt, a weight of observation that made his skin crawl. He turned slowly and saw them. 3 figures stood at the edge of the glass circle, tall and motionless. In the moonlight, he could make out details that his mind struggled to process. They were humanoid in basic shape, but wrong in every proportion. 8 feet tall at least, with limbs too long, joints that bent in too many places. Their faces, if they could be called faces, were smooth except for large, dark eyes that reflected light like a nocturnal animal's. Marcus's hand went to his service weapon, but he didn't draw it. Something told him it would be useless, might even provoke them. Instead, he stood still, meeting their gaze, if they were actually looking at him. One of them moved, a fluid motion that seemed to ignore the normal laws of physics. It raised what might have been an arm, and Marcus heard a voice in his head, not through his ears, but directly in his consciousness. "You see us?" It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded slowly. "You seek understanding." Another nod. "Understanding brings obligation. Will you accept?" Marcus thought of the terrified families, the mutilated animals, his duty to protect and serve. "I need to know why. Why the animals? Why here?" Images flooded his mind, not words but pure information, downloading directly into his consciousness. He saw Shadow Mesa from above, but not as it was now. He saw it thousands of years ago when it served as something else. A beacon, a landmark, a gathering place for beings that traveled between stars. He saw the beings' purpose, not invasion, not colonization, but observation. They were scientists of a sort, studying Earth's biological development, taking samples to understand how life evolved on this particular world. The livestock mutilations weren't attacks, but sample collections, done with technology that prevented suffering but left behind disturbing remains. He saw their predicament, stranded here temporarily, their method of travel damaged, needing biological materials to synthesize compounds for repairs. They hadn't meant to frighten anyone, had tried to remain hidden, but human expansion into previously empty areas had made concealment increasingly difficult. The flow of information stopped, leaving Marcus gasping, his nose bleeding, head pounding from the direct mental contact. "You understand now. What will you do?" Marcus wiped the blood from his nose, thinking fast. "How long? How long until you leave? 7 rotations of your moon. Perhaps 8. And the sampling? Will it continue? It must, but..." Another image, a map of the area, with certain locations marked. Places where old or sick animals could be found. Wildlife rather than livestock. A compromise. "If I guide you to animals that are already dying, wild ones, will you leave the ranches alone?" The beings seemed to confer without speaking or moving. Then, acceptable. "You will mark locations. We will harvest only what you designate. And in exchange, you stop taking ranch animals. No more scaring families." "Agreed, but you must tell no others of this arrangement." Marcus thought of his report, his duty to the truth. But he also thought of what would happen if the government knew. The military response, the media circus, the fear and violence that would inevitably follow. Agreed. The next morning, Marcus woke in his patrol car at the base of Shadow Mesa, with a splitting headache and dried blood crusted under his nose. His mechanical camera was empty of film, though he distinctly remembered loading it. His digital devices showed no record of the previous night's activities. According to their timestamps, they'd been offline for the entire period. But the knowledge remained, burned into his memory with crystalline clarity. The beings, the agreement, the responsibility he'd accepted. As he drove back to town, Marcus wondered if he'd had some kind of breakdown, hallucinated the entire encounter. Then he saw the news on his phone. No new mutilations reported. The first morning in 2 weeks without a dead animal. He stopped at a diner in Tohatchi for coffee and breakfast, trying to appear normal while his mind raced. How could he identify dying wild animals? How could he mark locations without arousing suspicion? And how could he maintain this secret for 2 months? Patricia Benally was in the diner, dark circles under her eyes from weeks of sleepless nights. She approached his booth hesitantly. "Officer Yazzie? Any progress on the situation?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "I've been investigating some patterns. I think the incidents might decrease. Maybe whatever was causing them has moved on." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Really? Do you know what it was?" "Still investigating. But I tell people to stay vigilant, keep their animals close when possible. And Patricia, if anything unusual happens, call me directly." He wrote his personal cell number on a napkin. She took it gratefully. "Thank you. People are scared, but knowing you're on it helps." After she left, Marcus made a plan. He'd need to patrol regularly, identify sick or injured wildlife, and somehow communicate their locations. The mental contact with the beings had left him with an understanding of how to mark sites, arrange stones in specific patterns that their technology could detect from altitude. His first stop was the reservation's wildlife management office. His cousin, Jennifer Nez, worked there as a biologist. "Marcus, what brings you here?" "Hey, Jen, I need a favor. I'm working on something related to the livestock problems near Shadow Mesa. Can you tell me about sick or injured wildlife in that area? Animals that might attract predators?" Jennifer pulled up data on her computer. "Actually, we've been tracking a chronic wasting disease outbreak in the deer population there. It's bad. We've identified at least a dozen infected animals that need to be culled." "Why?" "I'm exploring every angle. If there are sick deer around, maybe they're attracting whatever's killing livestock. Can you show me where these deer are?" She printed maps with GPS coordinates. "These are the confirmed cases. The disease is always fatal, and affected deer usually die within a few months of showing symptoms. We've been meaning to organize a culling operation, but resources are tight." "What if they just disappeared? Would that help?" Jennifer laughed. "If someone wanted to do our job for us? Sure. But Marcus, these animals are diseased. They can't be used for meat." "I understand. Just thinking out loud." That afternoon, Marcus visited the first location, finding a deer exactly where Jennifer's data indicated. Emaciated, stumbling, clearly in the final stages of disease. He arranged stones in the pattern he somehow knew, then mercifully shot the animal. He'd tell anyone who asked that he'd disposed of diseased wildlife, a partial truth that would hold up under scrutiny. That night, he parked where he could observe the site from a distance. At exactly 2 a.m., his electronics failed again. A blue-white light descended silently, hovering over the deer carcass. He watched through binoculars as the now familiar tall figures emerged, their movements fluid and purposeful. They worked with incredible efficiency, taking their samples in minutes, then ascending back into the light. When they left, only bones remained, bleached white as if they'd been in the desert sun for years. The pattern continued for a week. Marcus would identify dying animals: deer with chronic wasting disease, a coyote hit by a car, an old elk dying of natural causes. He'd mark the locations and the beings would harvest them at night. No more ranch animals were taken. The community began to relax, thinking the threat had passed. But maintaining the secret took its toll. Marcus barely slept, constantly patrolling, marking sites, ensuring the beings had what they needed while protecting the community. His lieutenant noticed his exhaustion during a video call. "Marcus, you look like hell. What's going on out there?" "Just putting in extra hours, trying to solve this thing." "The mutilations have stopped, right?" "Maybe it's over." "Maybe. But I want to stay vigilant for a while longer, make sure they don't resume." Lieutenant Sosi studied him through the screen. "Marcus, if there's something you're not telling me, it's handled, Lieutenant. Trust me." She didn't look convinced, but didn't press. "Keep me informed. And get some rest. That's an order." 2 weeks into the arrangement, Marcus encountered a complication. Dr. Susan Johnson, the veterinarian, had been conducting her own investigation. She confronted him at the Totachine Ranch while he was ostensibly checking on their security measures. "Officer Yazzie, I've been mapping the mutilation sites. All the livestock attacks stopped 2 weeks ago, but I've been finding similar remains in the wilderness. Wild animals with the same surgical extractions." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Could be the same predator shifted to wild prey. Except these wild animals were already dying or dead when they were harvested." I examined the remains. Chronic wasting disease, injuries, old age. Whatever's doing this specifically selected animals that were already doomed. Her eyes narrowed. "And there's something else. I've found stone arrangements near each site, deliberate patterns. Someone is marking these animals." Marcus's mind raced. Susan was too smart, too observant. "What are you suggesting?" "I think someone knows what's happening, maybe even facilitating it." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Officer, I've seen things. Lights in the sky, figures that don't move like anything natural. I think we both know this isn't a normal predator situation." Before Marcus could respond, his radio crackled urgently. "All units, we have a 1054 at the Collins Ranch. Possible fatality. Marcus's blood ran cold. The Collins Ranch was outside his marked areas. Had the beings broken their agreement?" "We'll continue this later," he told Susan, rushing to his patrol car. The Collins Ranch was chaos when he arrived. Brad Collins, a recent transplant from Texas who ran a small cattle operation, was standing over a mutilated bull, but that wasn't what had everyone upset. His son, Tyler, age 16, was missing. He went out to check on the animals around midnight. Brad's wife, Karen, sobbed. "We heard this humming sound, saw lights. When we went outside, Tyler was gone, and we found the bull like this." Marcus examined the scene. The mutilation matched the pattern, but there was something else. Drag marks leading away from the carcass and drops of human blood. "Get search teams here now," Marcus ordered into his radio. "And somebody call state police." As teams assembled, Marcus tried to think. The beings had never shown aggression toward humans. If they'd taken Tyler, it had to be a mistake or misunderstanding. He needed to make contact, but how could he do so without revealing his knowledge to the growing crowd of searchers? He volunteered to search the Shadow Mesa Trail alone, claiming familiarity with the terrain. As he climbed in the darkness, he thought intensely about the beings, trying to project his thoughts. "We had an agreement. Where is the boy?" At the glass circle, he found them waiting. Tyler Collins lay unconscious but breathing at their feet. The young one interfered, the mental voice explained. He attacked us during harvest. We defended. He is damaged, but will survive. Marcus knelt beside Tyler, checking his vitals. The boy had a head wound and what looked like electrical burns on his hands. He's just a kid. He was protecting his family's livestock. We did not intend harm. We will repair what we can. One of the beings extended its elongated hand over Tyler. The air shimmered, and the boy's breathing steadied. The burns began to fade. He will wake with no memory of us. You must explain his injuries otherwise. I need to get him down the mountain, back to his family. We will transport. Before Marcus could object, the world shifted. One moment he was on Shadow Mesa. The next, he stood at the base of the mountain with Tyler in his arms. The disorientation made him stumble, but he managed to activate his radio. I found him. Tyler Collins is alive. Need medical at the Shadow Mesa trailhead immediately. The response was swift. Paramedics, family, other officers converged on their location. Marcus's story was simple. He'd found Tyler unconscious on the trail, possibly fallen while investigating the lights his family had seen. The head injury supported this narrative. As Tyler was loaded into an ambulance, Dr. Johnson appeared at Marcus's side. Convenient that you knew exactly where to look. Marcus met her gaze steadily. I know this terrain, made an educated guess. Officer Yazzie, I've been doing some research. There are historical accounts of similar incidents. Livestock mutilations, strange lights, tall beings. They go back centuries, always in cycles, always ending abruptly after a few months. What's your point? My point is that someone always knows more than they're saying. In the 1970s, it was a sheriff in Colorado. In the 1950s, a ranger in Montana. Someone who suddenly knows where to look, how to minimize damage. She studied his face. Someone who makes a deal. Marcus said nothing, but Susan nodded as if he'd confirmed her suspicions. I won't say anything, she said quietly, but if you need help, medical expertise, someone who understands, I'm here. The relief was overwhelming. Thank you. How much longer? 6 weeks, maybe 7. And then they leave? That's the agreement. Susan was quiet for a moment. Are they hostile? No, they're scientists, I think, observers. They just need resources to repair their ability to travel. And Tyler? Wrong place, wrong time. He surprised them, tried to fight. They defended themselves, but didn't want to hurt him. Susan nodded slowly. I'll help you identify suitable animals. My veterinary network covers 3 states. We always know where suffering animals are. With Susan's help, the next 3 weeks went more smoothly. She identified animals that needed euthanasia anyway. Horses with broken legs, cattle with terminal diseases, wildlife hit by vehicles. Marcus marked the locations, and the beings harvested what they needed without touching healthy livestock. The community, seeing no new attacks on their herds, began to relax. Stories of the mutilations became cautionary tales, then local legends. Tyler Collins recovered fully with no memory of his encounter, though he developed a fear of heights he couldn't explain. But as the 7th week approached, new complications arose. The government arrived in black SUVs on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks into Marcus's secret arrangement. He was refilling his patrol car at a gas station in Tohatchi when 3 vehicles pulled up, disgorging men and women in dark suits despite the desert heat. The lead agent, a tall woman with steel-gray hair, approached him with credentials already out. Officer Yazzie, Special Agent Diana Foster, Defense Intelligence Agency. We need to talk about the anomalous events in your jurisdiction. Marcus kept his expression neutral. The livestock mutilations. They stopped weeks ago. We both know it's more than that. She produced a tablet showing satellite imagery of Shadow Mesa with distinctive heat signatures. These were taken 3 nights ago. Whatever's up there isn't wildlife. I wouldn't know about that. Maybe equipment malfunction? Foster's smile was cold. Officer, we've been monitoring electromagnetic anomalies across the Southwest. The epicenter is here. We have reports of unidentified aerial phenomena, surgical livestock excisions, and now this. She showed another image, grainy but unmistakable, of the tall figures near a marked animal site. Marcus's mind raced. If the government intervened now, with only a week or 2 remaining, it could turn into a disaster. What exactly do you want? Cooperation? You've been patrolling this area extensively. You must have seen something. Lights, sometimes. Could be drones. Military exercises from the base in... Officer Yazzie. Foster interrupted. We know you climbed Shadow Mesa 3 weeks ago. We know you've been marking sites with stone patterns. We know Dr. Johnson has been helping you identify specific animals. What we don't know is why. Before Marcus could respond, his radio crackled with an emergency. All units. Massive brush fire reported near Shadow Mesa. Multiple structures threatened. Foster looked at the smoke rising in the distance. We'll continue this later. That fire's heading toward the Collins Ranch. Marcus raced toward the fire, the federal agents following. The blaze was enormous, driven by high winds across drought-dry grassland. It had started near one of his marked sites and was spreading faster than anyone anticipated. Fire crews were already establishing barriers, but the Collins Ranch was directly in the path. Brad Collins was desperately trying to evacuate his remaining cattle while his family loaded essentials into their truck. We need to clear this whole area, the fire chief shouted over the roar of flames. This thing's going to jump the road. As Marcus helped coordinate the evacuation, he noticed something odd. The fire was burning in an unusual pattern, intensely hot in specific spots while leaving others untouched. It reminded him of the glass circle atop Shadow Mesa. Dr. Johnson appeared beside him, her face grim. This isn't natural. What do you mean? Look at the burn pattern. It's following the electromagnetic anomaly lines I've been mapping. The fire's being drawn to areas with high EM activity. She pulled out her phone, showing an overlay of the fire's path and her anomaly map. They matched perfectly. Agent Foster had overheard. Dr. Johnson, I need to see all your data. As they argued, Marcus felt the familiar sensation of being watched. He looked toward Shadow Mesa and saw lights descending despite it being broad daylight. The beings were breaking cover. His radio and phone died simultaneously. Car engines stopped. The firefighting equipment went silent. Even the fire seemed to pause, flames frozen mid-flicker. 3 of the tall figures stood between the evacuees and the advancing fire. One raised its arm, and the air itself seemed to solidify into a barrier. The fire hit it and stopped, spreading sideways but unable to advance. Everyone stood frozen, staring at the impossible scene. Agent Foster slowly reached for her sidearm, but Marcus grabbed her wrist. Don't! They're helping. The beings maintained the barrier while the fire exhausted the fuel on their side. It took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of absolute silence except for the crackling flames. 20 minutes of humans and entities sharing the same space in uneasy coexistence. When the immediate danger passed, the beings turned to the assembled crowd. One focused on Marcus, and he heard its mental voice, knowing others were hearing it too. The fire was not natural. Your technology has destabilized the magnetic fields we use for navigation and concealment. We must leave sooner than planned." Agent Foster stepped forward, her hand still on her weapon but not drawing it. "Who are you? What do you want?" The being turned to her. Marcus saw her flinch as it responded mentally to everyone present. "We are observers. We have watched your species for millennia, recording your development. We mean no harm, take only what is already dying to sustain ourselves while we repair. The one you call Yazzie made an agreement. We would take only marked animals, already suffering, in exchange for leaving your healthy herds untouched." The crowd murmured, fear mixing with awe. Brad Collins pushed forward. "You took my bull. You hurt my son. Your offspring attacked us. We defended but did not kill. We repaired what damage we could. Your animal was payment for that mercy." "Payment?" Brad's face reddened. Marcus intervened. "Mr. Collins, Tyler's alive because they chose not to kill him when he attacked them with a shotgun. One bull seems like a small price." Dr. Johnson addressed the beings directly. "Your technology, your presence here, it's affecting our environment. The electromagnetic disturbances, the fire patterns, can you stop it? We are stabilizing what we can. But your government's surveillance, their satellites and monitoring stations have forced us to use more power for concealment. This creates instabilities." Agent Foster lowered her weapon slightly. "If we call off the surveillance, will you leave peacefully?" "We will leave regardless. 2 more rotations of your moon, perhaps 3. We have nearly completed our repairs. And then what? You come back in another 50 years to terrify a new generation?" The being seemed to consider this. "We have observed your species since before you had written language. We record the development of consciousness, the evolution of intelligence. Your planet is one of thousands we monitor." "Why?" Foster demanded. "To understand. Life is rare, consciousness rarer still. We catalog it, preserve a knowledge of it, study its myriad forms." An elderly Navajo man, Raymond Begay, stepped forward from the crowd. He spoke in Dene and Marcus translated. "He says his grandfather told him about the tall visitors. Says they've been coming since before the long walk, always watching, never harming unless provoked." The being turned to Raymond and responded in perfect Dene, shocking everyone present. The old man's eyes widened, and he nodded slowly. Marcus translated Raymond's response. "They say they knew our ancestors when they first came to this land. They've watched us grow from small bands to a great nation. They say they're proud of how we've survived." The moment was broken by the sound of helicopters approaching. Military, from the distinctive rotor sound. Agent Foster spoke quickly into her radio, trying to call them off, but the beings were already reacting. "Your military approaches with hostile intent. We will not allow capture or confrontation." The air around the beings began to shimmer. The crowd instinctively backed away. "Wait," Marcus shouted. "Let me talk to them. Agent Foster, call off the helicopters. These beings kept their agreement with me. They protected us from the fire. They deserved the same consideration." Foster hesitated, then barked orders into her radio. The helicopters veered off, circling at a distance rather than approaching. The shimmer faded. The central being focused on Marcus. "You have honored our agreement despite personal risk. This is noted. We offer exchange, knowledge for safety. We will share what we can of our observations of your world, and you ensure we can complete our repairs without interference." Marcus looked at Foster, who nodded slowly. "What kind of knowledge?" Images flooded everyone's mind simultaneously. Archaeological sites unknown to modern humans, climate data spanning millennia, extinct species that once roamed the area, cures derived from now extinct plants the beings had cataloged. Dr. Johnson gasped. The medical applications alone. This could revolutionize treatment for dozens of diseases. But Agent Foster was focused on something else. You've been watching us for thousands of years. What else is out there? Are we alone, except for you? You are not alone, but you are not ready. When your species stops killing itself over resources and beliefs, when you act as one world instead of warring tribes, then you will be ready to meet the others. Others? How many? The being didn't answer directly. Instead, it projected an image of the night sky with countless stars highlighted. Life finds a way, always. Your galaxy teems with it. But few species survive their technological adolescence. We hope you will be one that does. The next 2 weeks were unlike anything Marcus had experienced. The government established a perimeter around Shadow Mesa, not to contain the beings but to protect them from interference while they completed their repairs. Scientists were allowed supervised contact, exchanging information, under carefully controlled conditions. Marcus served as liaison, his established connection with the beings making him invaluable. He watched Dr. Johnson work with them to understand their tissue sampling techniques, leading to breakthrough insights into cellular regeneration. He saw Agent Foster's worldview shatter and rebuild as she grasped the true scope of humanity's place in the cosmos. The beings kept their word, sharing knowledge freely, but always within limits. They wouldn't provide weapons technology or anything that could be used for harm. They offered medical insights, agricultural improvements, and climate data that would help humanity adapt to the changes ahead. On the final night, Marcus climbed Shadow Mesa one last time. The entire community had gathered at the base. Ranchers who'd lost livestock, families who'd been terrified, government agents who'd come to contain a threat. They all watched as lights appeared in the sky, not hiding now but visible to all. At the glass circle, Marcus found the 3 beings waiting. "You have questions," one observed. "Will you come back?" "Perhaps. Your species is at a crossroads. The next century will determine whether you join the galactic community or destroy yourselves. We will watch." "Why did you trust me?" "That first night you could have just left, found another way. You climbed the mesa alone, seeking answers rather than bringing violence. You showed courage without aggression. These are traits worth preserving, worth nurturing. Your species will need such individuals in the times ahead." The being extended its elongated hand, and Marcus, after a moment's hesitation, reached out to touch it. The contact was electric, not painful, but intense. Information flowed. Not specific knowledge, but understanding. Marcus saw Earth from space, saw the connections between all living things, saw possible futures spreading like branches from the present moment. "Choose wisely," the being said as it withdrew its hand. "Your actions ripple forward in ways you cannot imagine." The ground beneath them began to vibrate. The glass circle glowed brighter than the moon. The beings moved to its center, their forms becoming less solid, more light. "We leave you with a warning," the central being communicated, its mental voice reaching everyone gathered below. "Others have noticed your world. Not all who watch are benevolent. Unite as a species, or you will not survive what comes." The light intensified, became blinding. Marcus shut his eyes, and when he opened them, the beings were gone. The glass circle remained, but it was cracked now, slowly crumbling into sand. By morning, no trace of it would remain except in the memories of those who'd witnessed it. Marcus descended the mesa to find the crowd dispersing quietly, each person processing what they'd experienced in their own way. Agent Foster stood by her vehicle, looking older than when she'd arrived. Officer Yazzie, she said as he approached. "There will be a full debrief, reports to file, committees to convince, but I wanted to say you handled this better than any of us would have. You prevented a catastrophe through diplomacy and courage. I just did my job, protect and serve." She smiled slightly. "Your jurisdiction just expanded considerably. We're forming a new task force, preparing for future contact, implementing the knowledge they shared, watching for the others they mentioned. We need someone who understands both the human and non-human perspectives. Interested?" Marcus looked back at Shadow Mesa, then at the community he'd served for 15 years. "Can I still work out of the reservation?" "We'll make it happen." As Foster drove away and the crowd fully dispersed, Dr. Johnson approached. "So, what now?" "Now we prepare," Marcus said. "They gave us knowledge and a warning. We'd better use both wisely." 6 months later, Marcus stood in his new office, still on the reservation, but now equipped with technology that seemed like science fiction. He coordinated with scientists implementing alien medical knowledge, helped establish protocols for future contact, and continued his regular patrols, keeping his community safe. The livestock mutilations had become legend, the truth known only to those who'd been there that day. The official story involved experimental aircraft and mass hallucination caused by electromagnetic phenomena. Most people accepted it, preferring comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. But changes were happening. Mysterious medical breakthroughs, agricultural innovations that seemed to come from nowhere, climate models with unprecedented accuracy, the being's gifts carefully distributed to avoid panic or disruption. Late at night, Marcus would sometimes drive to where Shadow Mesa cast its shadow across the desert and wonder if they were still watching. He'd think about their warning, about others who might come, and about humanity's chances of surviving its technological adolescence. His phone would ring. Another strange incident somewhere, another mystery to investigate. And Officer Marcus Yazzie would respond, as he always had, ready to protect and serve in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than he'd ever imagined. The pattern had changed. The visitors were gone. But the real work, preparing humanity for what came next, had just begun. 1 year after the beings departed, Marcus received a call that changed everything. It was 3 a.m., and he was reviewing satellite anomaly reports in his home office when his secure line rang. "Yazzie, we have a situation in Alaska." Agent Foster's voice was tense. "Remember the warning about others? We might have contact." Within 6 hours, Marcus was on a military transport to Fairbanks, along with Dr. Johnson and a team of specialists recruited after the Shadow Mesa incident. They called themselves the Contact Response Team, though officially they didn't exist. The briefing was troubling. 3 remote villages had reported strange occurrences, electronics failing, aurora borealis appearing in impossible colors, and most disturbing, people disappearing but returning days later with no memory of where they'd been. "This doesn't match our friend's pattern," Dr. Johnson observed, studying the reports. "No," Foster agreed, "which is why we're concerned." They established a base in Coldfoot, a tiny town that served as a jumping-off point for the Arctic wilderness. The affected villages were all within a 50-mile radius, accessible only by small aircraft or snowmobile in the harsh winter conditions. Marcus interviewed the returned missing persons. Unlike the peaceful, if unsettling mental contact with the Shadow Mesa beings, these people showed signs of trauma, unexplained scars, radiation exposure, and neurological changes that suggested invasive procedures. Emma Tuvak, a Inupiaq elder from the village of Anaktuvuk Pass, was the most recent returnee. She sat in the community center, wrapped in blankets, her hands shaking as she held a cup of tea. They were different, she told Marcus through a translator. Not like the old stories of visitors. These ones, they took without asking, examined us like we examine fish. No respect, no communication. Just cold study. Can you describe them? Emma closed her eyes, shuddering. Shorter than humans, but broader. Skin like seal leather, wet-looking. Eyes that never blinked, just studied. They had machines, so many machines. They put us in them, scanned us, took pieces. She pulled back her sleeve, revealing a precise circular scar on her forearm where tissue had been removed. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic cold. The Shadow Mesa beings had been scientists too, but they'd shown respect, made agreements. These new visitors seemed to view humans as nothing more than specimens. That night, the aurora erupted in shades of deep purple and red, colors that shouldn't exist in the natural phenomenon. The team's equipment went haywire, and then they saw it. A craft descending through the aurora, using the magnetic disturbance as cover. It was different from what Marcus had glimpsed at Shadow Mesa, more angular, aggressive-looking, with edges that seemed to cut through space rather than move through it. It landed 2 miles from town, hidden in a valley. "We need to make contact," Foster said, checking her weapon. "Wait," Marcus cautioned. "Let me go first, alone." If these are the others we were warned about, approaching with force might trigger something we can't handle. After heated debate, they agreed. Marcus approached the craft alone, wearing monitoring equipment and a communication device. As he descended into the valley, the temperature dropped 20 degrees instantly, his breath forming ice crystals that fell like glass. The craft's surface rippled, and an opening appeared. 3 figures emerged, exactly as Emma had described. Shorter than humans, powerfully built, with that disturbing wet leather skin. Their eyes were large, multifaceted like an insect's, reflecting Marcus's image in dozens of fragments. One raised a device that projected words directly onto Marcus's retina, painful and invasive. "You are the communicator from the desert incident." The tall ones marked you. Marcus fought through the pain to respond. "Yes, I made peaceful contact with them. I can do the same with you. Peace is inefficient. We require biological data. Your species shows unusual genetic diversity. We will complete our harvest. The beings who were here before, they took only from the dying, made agreements. You could. They are weak. That is why they run. We do not run. We take what we require." The device in the creature's hand intensified its output. Marcus felt his thoughts being pulled out, examined, discarded. They were reading his mind, but not gently like the Shadow Mesa beings. This was forced extraction. He saw their intent in the backwash of the mental probe. They planned to take hundreds of humans, conduct experiments, learn what they wanted, then discard the remains. Earth was just another stop in their research, humanity just another species to catalog. But in that mental contact, Marcus also felt something else. Fear. Not of humans, but of something else. The Shadow Mesa beings had been running from something. These creatures were running too, just more aggressively, taking what they needed without regard for the cost. "You're afraid," Marcus gasped through the pain. "You're fleeing something just like they were." The mental pressure stopped abruptly. The creatures tilted their heads in unison, a disturbing, synchronized movement. The tall ones told you of the Devourers. Marcus remembered the warning about things that consumed reality itself. They mentioned something they fled from. Is that what hunts you? The creatures exchanged rapid clicking sounds, their first audible communication. Then the Devourers consume all. Worlds, species, knowledge. We preserve data before consumption. Your world has perhaps 50 rotations before they arrive. 50 years, if you resist our harvest, less. Resistance creates energy signatures they follow. It was blackmail on a cosmic scale. Let them experiment on humans or face earlier annihilation. There has to be another way. Why would we seek another way? Your species is primitive. Your individual units are expendable. We preserve your genetic template. That is sufficient. Marcus thought of the Shadow Mesa beings, their respect for consciousness, their hope that humanity would survive its technological adolescence. These creatures saw humans as nothing more than genetic material to be preserved before the planet's destruction. What if we could offer you something else? The Shadow Mesa beings left us knowledge, medical data, genetic information already compiled. You could have that without taking people. The creatures considered this. Show us this data. Marcus activated his tablet, displaying some of the medical insights the tall beings had shared. The creatures absorbed it instantly, their multifaceted eyes flickering with rapid movement. Interesting, but insufficient. We require living subjects for complete analysis. Before Marcus could respond, alarms erupted from the town. His radio crackled with panicked reports. More craft were descending, surrounding the villages. The creatures hadn't come to negotiate, they'd come to harvest. "Stop this," Marcus shouted. "You have no authority here. We take what we require." The creatures turned back to their craft, dismissing him. Marcus made a desperate decision. He pulled out the device Dr. Johnson had given him, a prototype based on the Shadow Mesa beings' technology, designed to send a distress signal on frequencies they'd identified. He activated it. The effect was immediate. The creatures spun around, their clicking intensifying to a roar. The lead one pointed its device at Marcus, and agony shot through his skull. "You call the Tall Ones? They will not come. They do not interfere." But something else happened. The aurora above flickered and went dark. The temperature rose 30 degrees in seconds, and a sound like tearing metal echoed across the valley. A different craft materialized, not descended, just suddenly there. It was massive, dwarfing the harvester vessels, its surface covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. The harvesters backed toward their ships, their clicking now unmistakably fearful. Marcus recognized the new arrival's energy signature, not the Shadow Mesa beings, but something related to them. A voice spoke in Marcus's mind, different from both previous contacts, older, more powerful. The compact protects this world. "You were warned, harvesters. Depart or be removed." The lead harvester responded, its projected words visible in the air. "This world will be consumed. We preserve its uniqueness. This world is under observation by the collective. Your preservation is destruction. You will departure now." The harvesters didn't argue further. Their craft lifted off immediately, vanishing into the aurora. The massive ship remained for a moment longer. "Bridgewalker Marcus," the voice addressed him. "Your signal was heard. The compact holds. But understand, we cannot always intervene. Your species must grow strong enough to defend itself." "Who are you?" "We are what the Tall Ones became. Ascended, united with others who survived their technological infancy. We watch. We occasionally protect. But we cannot save you from yourselves. The devourers they spoke of are real, but they are not unstoppable. Prepare your people. Unite your world. You have time, but not much." The ship vanished, leaving Marcus alone in the valley, his head pounding, nose bleeding from the mental contact. He stumbled back to town to find chaos. People traumatized by near abduction. Systems fried by electromagnetic pulses, but everyone alive and accounted for. The cleanup took weeks. The official story blamed Russian military exercises and aurora-induced hallucinations. Most of the world believed it, wanted to believe it. But the contact response team knew better. In the secure debrief, Marcus laid out what he'd learned. We have maybe 50 years before something called devourers arrives. The harvesters were trying to preserve human genetic material before that happens, and there's apparently a collective of species that survived their technological advancement, including evolved versions of our Shadow Mesa friends. Foster rubbed her temples. So we're caught between harvesters who want to experiment on us, devourers who want to consume us, and protectors who won't directly intervene. The message was clear, Dr. Johnson said. We have to unite as a species and advance technologically, fast. How do we unite 7 billion people who can't agree on anything? Foster asked. Marcus thought about the Navajo Nation, how hundreds of clans had come together as one people to survive. Shared threats have a way of creating unity. We need to start preparing, quietly, build defenses, advance our technology using what the Shadow Mesa beings gave us, and slowly prepare the population for the truth. And if the harvesters come back, we make it clear that Earth is protected. We have the collective's attention now. That has to count for something. Officer David Sosi had been working for the Navajo Nation Police for exactly 3 months when he received a call that changed his career. He had just completed his training and was still trying to get used to a large patrol area on the Arizona-Utah border when the call came while he was filling up his drink at a truck stop. Unit 9, we have a situation on Route 163 near mile marker 89. Abandoned vehicle, possible missing person. David set down his coffee. Unit 9 responding. Details. 2018 Honda CR-V. Rental plates from Phoenix. Driver's door open. Engine still running when the trucker called it in 20 minutes ago. On my way. ETA 15 minutes. Route 163 cut through some of the most photographed landscape in America. Monument Valley's iconic sandstone buttes rising from the desert floor like ancient giants. But at 2 a.m. on a moonless night, it was just another dark highway where bad things could happen to unprepared tourists. David found the Honda exactly where dispatch had indicated, hazard lights still blinking. A semi-truck was parked behind it, the driver standing by his cab smoking a cigarette. "You the one who called it in?" David asked. The trucker, a heavy-set man named Carl according to his shirt, nodded. Almost rear-ended it, sitting right in the travel lane, door hanging open. I pulled over to check, but... He shrugged. Nobody there. Figured I better call you folks. David examined the scene with his flashlight. The Honda's engine was off now, but the keys were still in the ignition. A purse sat on the passenger seat. A cell phone on the center console showing 3 missed calls. No signs of struggle, no blood, but something felt wrong. The registration in the glove box identified the renter as Jennifer Martinez from Phoenix, age 28. Her driver's license photo showed a young woman with bright eyes and dark hair. David called dispatch to run her information while he searched the immediate area. 20 feet from the road, his flashlight beam caught something. Footprints in the sandy soil, heading into the desert. But these weren't the panicked run of someone fleeing danger, or the wandering path of someone confused. They were deliberate, measured, walking in a perfectly straight line toward the distant mesas. David followed the tracks for 100 yards before they simply stopped. Not gradually fading or obscured by wind, they just ended mid-step, as if Jennifer Martinez had vanished into thin air. He returned to his patrol car and called his supervisor, Sergeant William Nez, a 20-year veteran who'd seen everything the reservation could throw at a cop. "Sarge, I've got something strange out here." Tourist went missing, left her car running in the road, walked into the desert in a straight line, then the tracks just stop. There was a pause. "David, what's the date today?" "October 28th. Why?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Blood moon tonight. Fourth one this year. The same thing happened during the last 3. Tourists disappearing along that stretch of 163 inches. David felt a chill despite the warm night air. He'd heard about the previous disappearances during training, but hadn't connected them to lunar events. "You think they're related?" "Don't know what I think, but I know we've never found any of them. 6 people in 9 months, all along the same 20-mile stretch, all during blood moons. State police wrote it off as coincidence, people getting lost in the desert, but you don't buy it. Look around you, David. That desert's been there longer than humans have walked the earth. Sometimes old places have old hungers. Document everything, but don't go wandering off alone. I'm sending backup." While waiting for backup, David interviewed Carl the trucker more thoroughly. The man was clearly shaken, kept glancing at the desert nervously. "I drive this route twice a week," Carl said. "Have for 15 years. But on nights like this, when the moon's all red and wrong-looking, I usually push through without stopping. Except tonight I had to stop. Almost hit that car." "Seen anything else unusual? Other vehicles, people walking?" Carl hesitated. "You'll think I'm crazy. Try me. About 5 miles back, I saw someone walking along the shoulder. Thought it was weird, someone out here at night, but figured maybe their car broke down. But when my headlights hit them..." He swallowed hard. "Officer, I swear they didn't have a shadow. Light went right through them, like they weren't really there." David documented Carl's statement, then sent him on his way. Backup arrived in the form of Officer Rachel Begay, a 10-year veteran with a reputation for being unflappable. "Blood moon brings out the weird," she said, surveying the scene. "My grandmother won't even leave her hogan on nights like this. Says it's when the boundary gets thin." "Boundary?" "Between our world and elsewhere. Old Navajo belief. Most people think it's superstition, but after 10 years out here, I'm not so sure." They searched the area more thoroughly, using high-powered lights and a systematic grid pattern. About a quarter-mile from where the footprints ended, Rachel found something disturbing. A section of ground where the sand had been fused into glass, forming intricate patterns that looked almost like writing. "David, look at this." He knelt beside the glass formation. It was still warm to the touch, though there was no sign of fire or any heat source. The patterns were hypnotic, seeming to shift and change when viewed peripherally. "This wasn't here last week," Rachel said. "I patrolled this stretch regularly. This is new." They photographed everything, took samples of the glass and expanded their search area. As they worked, David noticed the blood moon rising higher, casting everything in a deep red glow that made the familiar landscape look alien. At 3:47 a.m., their radios crackled simultaneously. "All units, we have another abandoned vehicle. Route 163 mile marker 78. Possible 1054. Rachel and David exchanged glances. That was only 11 miles from their current location. "We'll take it," Rachel responded, "en route." They found another rental car. This one, a Toyota Camry, engine still running, driver's door open. The registration identified the renter as Michael from Los Angeles, age 35. Just like before. Keys in the ignition. Personal belongings left behind. Footprints leading in a straight line into the desert before abruptly ending. 2 in one night, Rachel muttered. This is escalating. As they processed the second scene, David noticed something. "Rachel, look at the direction of the footprints from both scenes." She oriented herself, checking her compass. They're both heading toward the same point. Northeast, toward Black Mesa. Black Mesa was a massive geological formation, straddling the Arizona-Utah border, sacred to the Navajo people, and off-limits to tourists. It was also, according to the stories David had heard growing up, a place where strange things happened. "We need to follow these paths, see where they converge," David said. Rachel shook her head. "Not at night, not during a blood moon, and definitely not without more backup and tribal permission to enter sacred land. We document what we have and wait for daylight." But daylight brought no answers. As the sun rose, painting the red rocks gold, Jennifer Martinez and Michael remained missing. Search teams with dogs found nothing. The animals refused to follow the tracks past a certain point, whimpering and pulling back against their leads. David spent the day researching, pulling files on the previous disappearances. The pattern was clear. All happened during blood moons, all along the same stretch of highway. All involved people walking in straight lines toward Black Mesa before vanishing. He also found something else in the historical records. Similar disappearances going back decades, always dismissed as people getting lost in the desert. But the descriptions were consistent. Abandoned vehicles, straight-line paths, tracks that ended impossibly. That evening, as David prepared for another night shift, his grandfather, Joe Sosi, called him. Joe was a respected elder, a keeper of traditional knowledge who rarely involved himself in modern affairs. "I heard you're investigating the blood moon disappearances," Joe said without preamble. "How did you—" "Never mind. Yes, grandfather. 2 more last night." "David, there are stories I never told you, things your generation wasn't interested in hearing. But now you need to know. Can you come by before your shift?" David drove to his grandfather's traditional hogan near Kayenta. Joe was sitting outside, looking toward Black Mesa in the distance. "That mountain has always been special," Joe began. "Long before the white men came, before even the Navajo arrived in these lands, something else lived there. The ancient Puebloans knew about it, built their dwellings to avoid its sight lines, never traveled during certain moon phases. What is it? We call it the hunger that walks. Not a creature, not a spirit, but something in between. It sleeps mostly, deep in the mesa. But when the moon turns to blood, it wakes and calls. Some people hear that call stronger than others, usually those who are already lost in some way, searching for something they can't name." David thought about the missing tourists. "It takes them?" "Takes, calls, invites. The words don't quite fit. They walk to it willingly, following something only they can perceive. And when they reach the boundary place, they cross over." "Cross over to where?" Joe shrugged. "Nobody who crosses ever comes back to tell. But the stories say they don't die, exactly. They become part of something else. Something that exists alongside our world but separate from it. Grandfather, I'm a police officer. I can't put supernatural kidnapping in my report. I'm not telling you what to put in your report. I'm telling you what you're really dealing with. The next blood moon is in January. It will happen again, unless..." "Unless what?" Joe was quiet for a long moment. "There's a way to close the boundary, to put the hunger back to sleep for a longer time. But it requires someone to walk the path voluntarily, to go to the boundary but not cross, to face the hunger and refuse its call. It's been done before, generations ago, but the knowledge of how to do it safely has been mostly lost." David left his grandfather's hogan with more questions than answers. He couldn't ignore his duty as a police officer, but he also couldn't dismiss the traditional knowledge that seemed to explain what modern investigation couldn't. That night, patrolling the same stretch of Route 163, David made a decision. He would research both angles: the rational, procedural investigation his training demanded, and the traditional approach his grandfather suggested. Somewhere between the two, he hoped to find a way to stop the disappearances. As the blood moon set behind the mesas, casting long shadows across the desert, David thought about the 6 people who had vanished, about Jennifer Martinez and Michael walking into the darkness. Were they dead? Transformed? Trapped somewhere between worlds? He didn't have answers yet, but he had 3 months until the next blood moon. 3 months to figure out how to stop the hunger that walks from claiming more lives. Over the next 2 months, David threw himself into research with an intensity that worried his colleagues. He spent his off hours in libraries, interviewed elders across the reservation, and compiled a database of every unexplained disappearance along Route 163, going back 50 years. The pattern was undeniable: clusters of vanishings coinciding with lunar tetrads, the occurrence of 4 consecutive blood moons. Rachel found him one December morning in the station's break room, surrounded by maps, astronomical charts, and old police reports. "David, you need to sleep. You look like hell." "I'm close to something, Rachel." "Look at this." He showed her a hand-drawn map from 1897, created by a cavalry officer stationed at Fort Defiance. He documented 12 disappearances during what he called the Red Moon season. Same area, same straight-line paths toward Black Mesa. Rachel sat down, studying the map. "That's over a century ago. How long has this been happening?" "According to the oral histories I've collected, centuries at least. Maybe longer. The ancestral Puebloans have pictographs warning about the walking nights when the moon bleeds." "And nobody's tried to stop it?" "They have. My grandfather mentioned someone who walked the path but didn't cross. I've been trying to find records of how they did it." David pulled out a notebook filled with interviews. "I found 3 elders who remember stories about a ceremony, a way to walk between worlds without getting lost. But they only remember fragments." Sergeant Nez appeared in the doorway. "Sosi, Begay, my office." They found the sergeant with a woman they didn't recognize. Mid-40s, professional dress, clearly not local. "This is Dr. Patricia Reeves from the University of Arizona's Department of Anomalous Studies," Nez said. "Apparently, word of our situation has reached academic circles." Dr. Reeves stood, offering her hand. "Officers, I specialize in investigating recurring disappearance patterns that defy conventional explanation. Your case fits several parameters we've been tracking." David and Rachel exchanged glances. "Department of Anomalous Studies?" Rachel asked.
A small grant-funded program that investigates phenomena at the intersection of folklore and reality. We've documented similar incidents worldwide, places where people vanish during specific astronomical events, always walking purposefully toward something only they can perceive. "And you've found explanations?" David asked. "Theories. Some locations seem to experience dimensional thin spots, places where parallel realities bleed through during certain conditions. The blood moon's gravitational and electromagnetic effects might amplify these natural anomalies." Sergeant Nez leaned back in his chair. "Dr. Reeves has funding and resources we don't. She's offering to assist with the investigation." "There's more," Dr. Reeves added. "We've developed equipment that can detect dimensional fluctuations. If there is some kind of portal or boundary forming during blood moons, we might be able to measure and potentially disrupt it." David felt both hope and skepticism. "What do you need from us?" "Access to the sites, your research, and local cultural knowledge. I've learned that indigenous oral traditions often contain accurate observations of these phenomena, encoded in mythological language." They agreed to collaborate. Over the next week, Dr. Reeves and her small team set up monitoring equipment along Route 163, focusing on the areas where tracks had ended. The devices, a mix of magnetometers, electromagnetic field detectors, and something she called a quantum flux sensor, ran continuously, gathering baseline data. David shared his research with her, including his grandfather's stories about the hunger that walks. Dr. Reeves listened without the skepticism he'd expected from an academic. "Many cultures have similar legends," she said. "The Bermuda Triangle, the Bridgewater Triangle, Japan's Aokigahara Forest, places where the normal rules don't quite apply. Your hunger that walks might be how the Navajo traditionally described a recurring dimensional phenomenon." 2 weeks before the January blood moon, they made a breakthrough. The quantum flux sensors detected an anomaly, a slowly strengthening field centered on a specific point in the desert, exactly where David had calculated the walking paths would converge. "It's building toward something," Dr. Reeves explained, showing them the data. "Like a battery charging. The blood moon might be the trigger, but the charge has been building for weeks." David made a decision that he didn't share with the others. If someone needed to walk the path to close the boundary, he would be that person. He'd been preparing, learning what he could from the fragmented ceremonies his grandfather and other elders remembered. 3 days before the blood moon, his grandfather called him to the hogan again. This time, several other elders were present, including a medicine man named Robert Yazzie, who David had never met before. "You're planning something foolish," Robert said bluntly. "Walking the path without proper preparation is suicide. People are disappearing. I have to try something." Robert studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Your grandfather says you've been marked by this from birth. Born during a blood moon, first cried when the moon was fully eclipsed. Maybe you were meant for this." They spent the night teaching David what they knew. Fragments of protection ceremonies, ways to anchor his consciousness to this reality while walking close to another. They gave him items to carry: a pouch of corn pollen blessed in old ways, a piece of turquoise from a sacred mountain, and most importantly, a length of rope. "The rope is both literal and symbolic," Robert explained. "One end stays here, anchored to this world. The other goes with you. As long as you hold it, you have a path back." The night of the blood moon, January 31st, David positioned himself at the convergence point Dr. Reeves had identified. The research team was stationed nearby with their equipment, monitoring. Rachel and Sergeant Nez were there too, having figured out David's plan. "This is insane," Rachel said. "We should call in federal resources, evacuate the highway." "And tell them what?" David responded. "That we're fighting an interdimensional entity that feeds on lost souls? They'd laugh us off the reservation." As the moon rose, already beginning to turn red, the quantum flux sensors went wild. The air itself seemed to thicken, taking on an oily quality that made breathing difficult. At exactly 11:47 p.m., they heard engines on the highway. 2 cars, both slowing, both pulling over at different points along Route 163. "It's starting," Dr. Reeves said, watching her monitors. "The field is reaching out, calling to specific psychological profiles. People experiencing loss, searching for meaning, emotionally vulnerable." David saw them through binoculars, 2 figures exiting their vehicles, beginning to walk with that same purposeful stride toward the convergence point without hesitation. He began walking too, intercepting their path. The rope tied to his waist unspooled behind him, held at the other end by Rachel and Sergeant Nez. Each step forward felt like pushing through increasingly thick liquid. The air hummed with energy that made his teeth ache. Ahead, he saw the 2 new victims, a middle-aged man and a young woman, both walking with blank expressions, their eyes focused on something beyond normal sight. David moved to block their path, but they walked around him as if he were a stone in a stream. Then he saw what they were seeing.
The boundary was visible now, a shimmering curtain of light that hurt to perceive directly. Beyond it, shapes moved, tall, impossibly thin figures that seemed to be made of condensed shadow and hungry light. The hunger that walks, not one entity but many, a collective consciousness that existed in the spaces between realities. The two victims walked toward the boundary without hesitation. David grabbed the man's arm, tried to pull him back, but his hand passed through as if the man were mist. They had already begun transitioning, becoming less solid as they approached the boundary. David understood then. He couldn't save those already called, but he could close the door. He walked to the boundary himself, feeling the rope grow taut behind him. The hunger noticed him then, its attention like the weight of a mountain. It pressed against his mind, showing him visions of other worlds, other realities where physics worked differently, where consciousness wasn't trapped in flesh. Join, it whispered without words. Transcend. Become. David pulled out the corn pollen, scattered it in the traditional way. The hunger recoiled slightly, its form becoming less defined. He spoke the words Robert Yazzie had taught him, not in English or even modern Navajo, but in something older, words that predated written language. The boundary began to fluctuate, its steady shimmer becoming erratic. The two victims passed through, their forms dissolving into light that was absorbed into the collective mass of the hunger. David felt their consciousness merge with it, not destroyed, but transformed into something unrecognizable. He continued the ceremony, each word and gesture remembered from his night with the elders. The turquoise in his hand grew hot, almost unbearable to hold. The rope around his waist was the only thing keeping him anchored as the hunger pressed harder against his mind, trying to pull him through. Then he did what the elders had said was crucial. He offered the hunger an alternative. Not human consciousness, but the energy of the ceremony itself, the power built up through decades of accumulated disappearances. It was like grounding an electrical charge, channeling it safely into the earth rather than through human bodies. The hunger considered, its alien intelligence weighing the offer. Then, slowly, it began to withdraw. The boundary started to close, not completely but enough. The shimmering curtain faded to barely visible, the calling silence. David collapsed to his knees as the pressure released. Rachel and Sergeant Nez pulled him back with the rope, dragging him away from the convergence point. Dr. Reeves was shouting something about the readings, about quantum signatures stabilizing. When David could focus again, he saw that dawn was breaking. The blood moon had set. The desert looked normal again, just sand and rock and scrub brush. But he knew it was different now. The boundary was still there, just dormant, sleeping rather than hunting. "How long?" he asked Robert Yazzie, who had appeared sometime during the night. "Maybe 10 years, maybe 20. Depends on many factors. But you've bought us time." The aftermath was complicated. 2 more people were missing. Brian Foster, a divorced accountant from Denver, and Lucy Park, a college student from California who'd been driving to her grandmother's funeral. Their cars were towed, missing persons reports filed, searches conducted that everyone knew would find nothing. Dr. Reeves spent weeks analyzing the data her instruments had collected. She published a paper in an obscure journal about anomalous electromagnetic phenomena correlating with lunar events, carefully avoiding any mention of interdimensional entities or ancient hungers. "The scientific community isn't ready for the full truth," she told David before leaving. "But the data is there for those who know how to read it. We're establishing monitoring stations at similar sites worldwide. Your actions here might help us understand and prevent these incidents elsewhere." She left behind some equipment for the tribal police to monitor the convergence point, showing David how to read the quantum flux measurements. "If it starts building again outside the normal lunar cycle,
Call me immediately." David returned to his regular patrols, but everything felt different. He'd seen behind the veil of reality, knew that the desert held more
than scorpions and coyotes. Other officers treated him with a mixture of respect and unease. He was the cop who'd walked to the boundary and come back. 3 months after the incident, Jennifer Martinez's parents came to the reservation. They'd driven from Phoenix, desperate for answers about their daughter's disappearance. David met with them at the station, Rachel sitting in for support. "Please," Mrs. Martinez said, tears streaming down her face. "The state police say she got lost in the desert, that she's dead." "But you were there. What really happened to Jennifer?" David had prepared for this moment, but it didn't make it easier. "Your daughter left her vehicle and walked into the desert. We tracked her for about a quarter mile before losing the trail. Despite extensive searches, we haven't found any trace of her." "But why?" Mr. Martinez demanded. "Why would she just walk away?" "She was driving to see us, excited about her new job. It doesn't make sense." This was the hard part, giving them enough truth to help them grieve without the full truth that would haunt them forever. "We've documented similar incidents during unusual atmospheric conditions," David said carefully. "Some people seem more susceptible to disorientation during certain lunar phases. It's possible your daughter experienced something like that, a momentary confusion that led her away from safety." "Is she dead?" Mrs. Martinez asked bluntly. David met her eyes. "I don't believe she's coming back," he said, which was true, even if not complete. They left unsatisfied, but with a sense of closure. David watched them drive away, wondering if Jennifer Martinez still existed in any form recognizable as human, or if her consciousness had been completely absorbed into the collective hunger beyond the boundary. A year passed. David continued his research, becoming the reservation's unofficial expert on unusual disappearances. He consulted on cases across the Southwest, recognizing patterns others missed. Most were normal missing persons cases, but occasionally he'd identify the telltale signs: the straight-line walks, the abandonment of vehicles with engines running, the correlation with astronomical events. He also deepened his connection to traditional knowledge. Robert Yazzie became a mentor, teaching him ceremonies and stories that most young Navajo never learned. David discovered that many indigenous cultures worldwide had similar protectors, people who stood between their communities and forces beyond normal understanding. "Every generation needs someone who can walk between worlds," Robert told him. "Someone who understands both the modern and the ancient, who can translate between science and spirit. You've become that person for our time." On a quiet Tuesday evening, 18 months after the blood moon incident, David was finishing paperwork when his quantum flux sensor triggered an alarm. The readings were unlike anything he'd seen, not the slow build toward a blood moon event, but sharp, erratic spikes. He drove to the convergence point, finding something unexpected. A young boy, maybe 12 years old, standing exactly where the boundary had been. The boy was local, Timothy Benally, whose family lived 20 miles away. He was fully conscious, not in the trance state of the blood moon walkers, but his eyes reflected light in a way that wasn't quite normal. "Timothy? What are you doing out here?" The boy turned to him, and David saw that his pupils were dilated despite the setting sun's brightness. "I can hear them," Timothy said. "They're trying to tell us something, warning us." "Who's warning us?" "The ones who crossed over. They're still there, Officer Sosi. Still aware, but something else is coming. Something that even the hunger fears." David felt a chill run down his spine. He approached slowly, noting that his equipment was going haywire. Electromagnetic readings off the charts, quantum flux sensors detecting multiple dimensional intrusions. "Timothy, I need you to come with me. Your parents are worried." "They sent me to find you," Timothy said. "The ones who crossed. They said, you're the only one who understands both sides. There's going to be another convergence, bigger than before. Not the hunger reaching for us, but something else pushing through." David got Timothy into his patrol car and called for backup, then contacted Dr. Reeves. By the time she arrived 2 days later, 3 more children from different parts of the reservation had shown up at the convergence point, all with the same message. Something was coming. Dr. Reeves' equipment confirmed it. "The dimensional barrier isn't just thin here," she explained. "It's deteriorating. Whatever you did during the blood moon sealed one door, but may have weakened the overall structure." Robert Yazzie and the other elders were brought in. They performed ceremonies to strengthen the barrier, but the children kept coming, drawn by voices only they could hear. "They're young enough to hear without crossing," Robert explained. "Their minds are still flexible, not fully anchored to one reality. The ones who crossed over are using them as messengers." The message, pieced together from the children's fragmented reports, was terrifying. The hunger that walks was one of many entities existing between dimensions, feeding on consciousness and reality itself. But there was an ecosystem to it, a balance. Something had disturbed that balance. Perhaps humanity's increasing electromagnetic pollution, perhaps the ceremonies to close boundaries, perhaps something else entirely. Now, a different kind of entity was moving toward Earth's dimension. Not a hunger, but a void. Something that didn't feed on consciousness but erased it entirely. The disappeared ones, existing now as part of the hunger's collective, were terrified of complete annihilation. "They're asking for help," Timothy told David during one of his lucid moments. "The hunger will work with us to stop the void, but it needs anchors on this side. People who can walk between worlds without losing themselves." David understood what was being asked. He'd walked to the boundary once and survived. Now he might need to cross it partially, become a bridge between realities to prevent something worse from breaking through. The decision wasn't just his to make. He met with the tribal council, explaining the situation as best he could. Some dismissed it as nonsense, others were terrified, but a few understood the gravity of the situation. "If this void gets through, what happens?" the council president asked. According to the children's messages, it would unravel reality itself in an expanding sphere. Not just our dimension, but all connected ones. The disappeared, the hunger, us, everything would cease to exist. The council voted to support whatever measures were necessary. Resources were allocated, ceremonies planned. Dr. Reeves brought in colleagues from around the world who'd been monitoring similar sites. They discovered that the deterioration wasn't limited to Black Mesa. Dimensional boundaries were weakening globally. As David prepared for what might be his final journey to the boundary, he thought about the path that had brought him here. 3 months as a rookie cop investigating a missing person, and now he was preparing to partially merge with an interdimensional entity to prevent reality from unraveling. Rachel found him at the convergence point the night before the planned ceremony. "You know you might not come back," she said. "Not fully, anyway." "I know, but someone has to do it." "Why you?" David looked toward Black Mesa, dark against the star-filled sky. "Because I've already been marked by this. Because I understand both the traditional and modern aspects. Because those who disappeared are asking for me specifically. They remember me from the blood moon." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "The families of the disappeared. If this works, will they get answers? Maybe. If I can establish communication, if the merger works, we might be able to send messages back. Let them know their loved ones still exist in some form. The next morning, as the sun rose over the desert, David stood at the convergence point surrounded by medicine men, scientists, fellow officers, and the children who heard voices from beyond. The ceremony would attempt something never before recorded, a controlled, partial merger between dimensions, creating a permanent bridge that could be activated when needed. David thought about Jennifer Martinez, Michael, and all the others who'd walked into the desert and never returned. Soon, he might understand what they'd experienced, what they'd become. As the ceremony began, as reality started to bend around him, David held on to two anchors, the rope tied to his waist, held by his colleagues in this world, and the memory of his duty to protect and serve, even if that service now extended beyond a single dimension. The boundary shimmered into existence, and David began to walk forward, ready to become something more and less than human to save both worlds. The crossing was nothing like David had imagined. There was no dramatic transition, no sudden shift from one reality to another. Instead, it was like slowly submerging into water that existed in more than 3 dimensions. Each step forward, he felt parts of himself stretching, expanding into spaces that human consciousness wasn't designed to perceive. The rope around his waist remained taut, his lifeline to the world he knew. Through it, he could feel the presence of his colleagues, Rachel's steady determination, Robert Yazzi's ceremonial strength, Dr. Reeves's scientific curiosity. They were his anchors, keeping his core self intact as the rest of him began to merge with something vast and alien. Then he heard them, the voices of the disappeared, not speaking but existing as pure thought forms within the Hunger's collective consciousness. Jennifer Martinez was there, still recognizable as an individual pattern within the whole. Michael, Brian Foster, Lucy Park, and dozens of others from across the decades. Officer Sosi, Jennifer's thought pattern, reached him. "You came. I'm here to help build the bridge, to stop the void, we know. We've been preparing, learning to maintain ourselves within the collective. It's not death, what happened to us. It's transformation. But the void, that would be true ending. The Hunger itself pressed against David's consciousness. No longer the alien predator he'd first encountered, but something more complex. It was ancient, beyond human comprehension, existing across multiple dimensions simultaneously, feeding on consciousness not out of malice but necessity. It was how it maintained its existence across realities. The one who refused us, the Hunger acknowledged. Now you come willingly, to save both our realities. You need us as much as we need you. Truth. The void unmakes all. We have flooded across dimensions for eons. Here, we thought we had found balance, but the barriers weaken everywhere. David felt the Hunger's fear, a cosmic terror of complete annihilation that made human fears seem trivial. But also, surprisingly, he felt its curiosity about humanity, its fascination with individual consciousness that remained distinct even when absorbed. Working together, David and the Hunger began to construct the bridge. It wasn't a physical structure but a stable connection between dimensions, reinforced by both human will and interdimensional energy. Through David's partial merger, the disappeared ones could lend their consciousness patterns to strengthen it. Time passed differently in this state. What felt like hours to David was minutes in the normal world, but also centuries in the space between dimensions. He experienced the memories of every person who had been absorbed by the Hunger, lived fragments of their lives, understood their final moments of transformation. Then he felt it. The void approaching. It wasn't darkness or emptiness, but the complete absence of existence itself. Where it touched, reality didn't just end, but never was. erasing not just the present, but the entire timeline of anything it consumed. "Brace," the hunger warned, and David felt the collective consciousness of dozens of absorbed humans joining with the alien entity to reinforce the bridge. The void struck the barrier between dimensions like a wave of unbeing. David experienced a moment of perfect non-existence. Not death, but complete erasure. Then the bridge held, channeling the void's nullification force around their reality rather than through it. But the effort was enormous. David felt parts of himself being pulled apart, his human consciousness struggling to maintain coherence. Through the rope, his anchors pulled harder, their ceremonial and technological efforts keeping him from fully dissolving into the collective. "Not enough," the hunger communicated. "The bridge weakens. Need more anchors." David understood. One person couldn't maintain this connection alone. He sent a message back through the rope, through his connection to the waiting team. In the physical world, Timothy Benally and the other sensitive children stepped forward. They were young enough to hear across dimensions but still fully anchored to physical reality. One by one, they touched the rope, adding their consciousness to the bridge network. The effect was immediate. The bridge stabilized, becoming something self-sustaining. The void pressed against it but couldn't break through. Gradually, incredibly, it began to recede, flowing around their dimensional bubble toward easier prey. "It moves on," the hunger reported with something like relief. "Seeks simpler realities to unmake. We have time, perhaps centuries before it circles back." David began the journey back, pulling himself along the rope hand over hand. But he wasn't returning unchanged. Parts of him remained connected to the bridge, to the hunger, to the collective consciousness of the disappeared. He would forever exist partially in both worlds. When he crossed back through the boundary, collapsing into the desert sand, he was still David Sosi, but also more. He could feel the thoughts of the disappeared like distant whispers, could sense the hunger's presence like a background hum, could perceive the dimensional boundaries that most humans never noticed. "David!" Rachel helped him sit up, checking his vitals. "Are you? "Mostly," he managed to say. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "The bridge holds. The void has passed, but I'm different." Dr. Reeves ran scans with her equipment, her eyes widening at the results. "Your quantum signature. It's fluctuating between dimensional states. You're existing in multiple realities simultaneously." Robert Yazzie approached, studying David with ancient eyes. "You've become what the stories speak of. A bridge walker, one who stands between worlds. It's a heavy burden, but a necessary one." Over the following weeks, David learned to manage his new state of existence. He could consciously access his connection to the other dimension, communicating with the disappeared, sensing dimensional instabilities, even predicting when the boundaries would weaken. He became a translator of sorts, passing messages between the disappeared and their families. The communications were limited. The transformed consciousness of the absorbed could only convey simple concepts, but it was enough to bring closure. David sat with Mrs. Martinez, holding her hand as he relayed her daughter's message. Not gone, different, part of something larger, no pain. Remember me with joy, not sorrow. The government, through Dr. Reeves's connections, quietly acknowledged the situation. A special task force was formed, officially to study anomalous disappearances, but actually to monitor and maintain dimensional boundaries worldwide. David became a consultant, teaching others what to look for, how to recognize when reality was becoming unstable. The children who had helped anchor the bridge were changed too, though less dramatically than David. They could sense dimensional fluctuations, serving as an early warning system. Timothy Benelli, in particular, showed remarkable ability to predict when and where boundaries might weaken. A year after the bridge was established, David stood at the convergence point, watching the sunset paint Black Mesa in shades of red and gold. Rachel stood beside him, now his partner in both police work and dimensional monitoring. "Any regrets?" she asked. David considered the question. He could feel Jennifer Martinez's consciousness pattern responding from beyond the boundary, a sense of gratitude and peace. He could feel the hunger, no longer a predator but an unwilling ally in protecting reality. He could sense the bridge, stable and strong, holding the void at bay. "No," he said finally. "This is what I was meant to do. Protect and serve, just on a larger scale than I ever imagined." As night fell, the stars emerged, countless points of light in the darkness. David now knew that around many of those stars, other realities faced similar challenges. Dimensional predators, consciousness collectors, reality-erasing voids. The universe was far stranger and more dangerous than most humans could imagine. But it was also full of protectors, bridgewalkers like himself, standing between worlds, maintaining the barriers that kept existence stable. The disappeared ones who sacrificed their human forms to become part of something larger. The hunger itself, which had evolved from predator to reluctant guardian. Route 163 still stretched across the desert. Tourists still drove through Monument Valley taking pictures of the iconic landscape. But now it was watched over by those who understood the deeper truths, that reality was fragile, that consciousness could transcend physical form, and that sometimes the greatest service was standing guard at boundaries most people never knew existed. David Sosi, 3 months out of police academy when this all began, had become something unprecedented, a human anchor point in a multidimensional defense network. His story would never make the official reports, never be taught at the academy. But among those who knew, who understood, he had become legend. The officer who walked between worlds and brought back hope that humanity could survive in a universe far stranger than anyone had imagined. The blood moon would rise again, but it no longer brought fear. The boundary was guarded, the bridge maintained, the void held at bay. And somewhere between dimensions, the consciousness patterns of the disappeared continued their transformed existence, part of Earth's newest and strangest line of defense.